Chapter 294. On the other hand, Li Hongyuan's subordinates behind him, who had previously given Li Hongyuan some face and sat quietly on the small boat at the back, now sped up and gathered in front of Li Hongyuan in an orderly manner. They knelt down on one knee and said, "Your subordinates greet the two masters." "No need for formalities," Li Hongyuan said lightly. He got up and steered the small boat to slide to the sides, standing on both sides and waiting for orders. Jingwan's attention was on the old man at first, but when she heard how these people addressed her, she raised her eyebrows slightly and smiled, accepting their greetings with pleasure. She originally wanted to see what her and Li Hongyuan's double looked like, but unfortunately the disguise on the face was gone. She could only tell who it was from the clothes. Just by looking at the figure, it was indeed more than 90% similar. What caught her attention was not Li Hongyuan's double but her own. She and Li Hongyuan had been married for more than 2 months. In such a short time, was it possible to create a very similar double? Or was it possible that she was already preparing before? But was it possible? After all, acting as a stunt double was different from filming in her previous life, where she only needed to look at her back. Not only did she have to look good, but she also couldn't reveal any flaws in small details or habits to be considered perfect. He had only seen her a few times before they got married, so how much could he know about her? Therefore she expressed doubts about the perfection of this double. Perhaps she was thinking too much. It did not need to be so perfect. As long as it could fool people who were not familiar with it, it would be enough. If there was a chance, she would take a look. Now was not the time to talk about this. Yu Zhongqing then stepped forward. "Greetings to Prince and Princess." Although he did not approve of Li Hongyuan's appearance, it was a foregone conclusion. In addition, the current situation did not allow it, so he did not say much. "No need for formalities. Lord Yu has worked hard these days." Li Hongyuan was quite amiable. Even Jingwan was a little surprised. Since when did he become a normal, or rather an ordinary prince? "Your Highness is too kind. It's not hard at all." In fact, it really wasn't hard at all. Although his duty on this trip was to follow orders to protect and monitor Jin Qinhuang, in fact he only needed to act according to Jin Qinhuang's orders. And as the saying goes, every profession has its own specialization. Therefore he basically had nothing to do on this trip and was more leisurely and carefree than in the palace. "You may leave." "Yes." Then Li Hongyuan finally gave the old man face and looked at him. Their eyes met and the atmosphere was inexplicably heavy. Many people did not dare to breathe loudly. From Jingwan's point of view, it seemed like they were competing to see who would lose their cool first. "Your Highness has already grown up and is married. I'm sure you have a few children by now." The old man's face was filled with emotion. His tone was not forceful and was even warm. However, it was obvious that he regarded himself as an elder. In his eyes, Li Hongyuan was the child he had not seen for a long time. He felt gratified but also guilty. At this moment, Jingwan's favorable impression of this person plummeted. To be honest, she was disgusted. For more than 20 years you didn't ask about anything. Now that you met for the first time you had this kind of virtue. Who do you think you are? You really think you're someone important, ah? Don't say that this Li Hongyuan's birth mother was expelled by your Pei clan. There was no relationship between the two of you. Even if you want to forcefully establish a relationship, don't forget that he is a prince, a Qinhuang. And you in essence are just a commoner. When you meet you still have to pay your respects. Moreover, if you really wanted to return to the imperial court and regain control of power, making the name of Pei clan live up to its name, and this grandson who was blood related to Pei clan was listed as the most important link, then you would definitely pay attention to his situation. But now it seemed like you didn't know anything. This child or whatever, it was specially said to disgust her. However, when she thought about it, the most important thing for a clan was the flourishing of branches and leaves. It was simply a place that specialized in producing studs. It was normal for the clan to have a large number of wives and concubines. Their requirements for their wives were probably more virtuous than the empress. After all, the Li royal family was less than 100 years old and was born as a peasant. In terms of etiquette, they were probably despised by these aristocratic families. And the madam of an aristocratic family was naturally the model of etiquette and etiquette. Otherwise, she would definitely not be able to hold on to her position. According to the information that Jingwan learned from Li Hongyuan, his mother was completely abandoned at that time. She was penniless and alone. Just think about it, if there was even a little bit of affection he would think carefully for her, give her some money and arrange a few people to take care of her. Lu Qingdi liked her, how could he refuse those? Even if she was with Lu Qingdi, who was not the emperor at that time, she didn't have to worry about food and clothing. But this was not the key point. The key point was his intention. How hurtful it was to be so cold and heartless. Now that he was in need, he came up again and acted as if nothing had happened. He was really shameless to this extent. Li Hongyuan might be shameless, but he played fair and square. He even took it for granted and never denied it. But this person clearly did the most disgusting thing, but he insisted on standing on the highest point of morality and flaunting himself as a saint. He was more disgusting than the most despicable villain. Li Hongyuan raised the corner of his mouth and sneered, "No one in the whole Qiyuan dares to speak to me in this tone. Where did you come from? How dare you flaunt your seniority in front of me?" The old man choked. He probably didn't expect that he would be so rude, but his expression didn't change. He just sighed slightly with a little indulgence and helplessness. "Your Highness, I'm your grandfather, the patriarch of the Pei family in Jiangnan. Your mother is my only legitimate daughter. I don't know if His Majesty has told you this before." "Grandfather? The Pei family in Jiangnan? I only know that my mother is an unknown orphan. She was only conferred the title of Imperial Noble Consort because she was deeply favored by His Majesty. When did she have a maternal family?" The patriarch of the Pei family showed his anger at the right time. It was obvious that he wasn't targeting Li Hongyuan. He looked at him with great affection. When the Qiyuan was first established, the Pei family withdrew from the imperial court and swore not to have anything to do with the Li family. Back then His Majesty hadn't ascended the throne yet. He was running errands in Jiangnan and happened to see your mother. He took a fancy to her beauty. He didn't care that your mother was waiting to be married and took her by force. As he spoke, his voice was full of grief. "We're sorry for your mother. We're sorry for you." Li Hongyuan's face was full of mockery. If it were anyone else, they might have felt a little emotional. Unfortunately, not only did Li Hongyuan understand the cause and effect of everything, he was also a cold-hearted person. He had already learned about this so-called grandfather of his in his previous life. However, at that time he had already ascended the throne and this person's attitude was relatively humble. Moreover, his temper was quite bad at that time. He was the kind of person who would chop people's heads off if they didn't agree with him. Naturally, this person didn't dare to put on airs and put on airs. When he found out that the person he had invited before was just a substitute, he had already expected that it would be more difficult to move his grandson than he had expected. Originally, he did not think that he could succeed with just a few words. If it really succeeded, he would be disappointed. Therefore, he only showed some sadness at being treated like this by his own grandson. While the difficulty of the matter increased, Clan Head Pei was actually quite happy. This meant that this grandson of his was not as unambitious as he appeared to be on the surface. Only with ambition would he have a chance, and only with ambition would the Pei family have a chance. He believed that the benefits brought by the Pei family would not be rejected by any prince who coveted the throne. Jingwan had seen many acting emperors, but to be honest, this Clan Head Pei who she met for the first time, made her feel inexplicably disgusted. "Your Highness, you must be tired from the journey. Rest for a while. As for the rest, we can slowly talk about it later. What do you think?" Seeing that Li Hongyuan didn't seem to be moved, Clan Head Pei smiled. "Your Highness, you came personally and even directly came here. I don't think you just want to bring your people back. So, I know what you're thinking. Don't be pretentious. Regardless of whether your mother is the daughter of the Pei family on the surface, that blood relationship can't be severed. Your Highness, don't you think so? Your Highness, this concubine is also a bit tired. Why don't this concubine rest? This concubine has heard that the imperial noble consort is a peerless beauty. I don't know how peerless her beauty is, but I also want to know a thing or two. Your Highness also wants to know, right?" Jingwan laughed softly. A strange look flashed across Clan Head Pei's eyes. "What does your Highness Wangfei want to know? This old man will definitely tell you everything." Li Hongyuan frowned slightly. He didn't comment on Clan Head Pei's words and only glanced sideways at Jingwan. "Fine." Clan Head Pei was overjoyed. With a wave of his hand, the boats behind him quickly parted. The small boat he was on also moved to the side and made a pleased gesture. Aside from Clan Head Pei's small boat, Li Hongyuan's men still occupied the surrounding area. Along the way, clan head Pei tried to talk to Li Hongyuan, but was ignored. He didn't get angry and settled for the next best thing. He started to chat with Jingwan. He was older than Luo Peishan and was also an elder. In essence, he just wanted to know about his grandson's situation, so it wasn't considered rude. Jingwan knew that if she were to argue with such a person, there was a 90% chance that she would lose completely. Therefore, she decided to tell him everything she knew. She would tell him everything she knew in detail, and anything else she would just use "I don't know" to brush him off. There was nothing she could do. After all, he hadn't been in the capital for a long time. Clan head Pei basically knew everything that Jingwan said. Because Jingwan's answers were too natural and he couldn't find any fault with them, he didn't know if Jingwan really didn't know or if she was faking it. However, his opinion of Jingwan had changed. He originally thought that she was just an ordinary woman who couldn't be compared to his Pei clan's daughter. Thus, from the beginning he had basically ignored her. Now it seemed that her bearing and self-restraint were excellent. She spoke in a calm and generous manner and was neither servile nor timid. Standing beside his grandson, she was extremely compatible. Regardless of whether her influence on his grandson was real or if the husband and wife were singing the same tune, her original plan had to be changed. After collecting the well-known information, Jingwan looked at Li Hongyuan meaningfully and asked about the imperial noble consort. Clan head Pei understood tacitly and naturally talked about his beloved daughter. She was chaste, gentle, considerate, and kind. She was proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, painting, poetry, songs, and so on. She was well versed in writing and even wrote history books. There was no need to talk about her beauty. Since she was young, there were countless people who wanted to marry her and almost broke the threshold. As he spoke, he revealed a sorrowful and melancholy expression. It's better for this woman's appearance to be mediocre. Otherwise, why would she be separated from her flesh and blood and not want to see her again? He spoke with unwillingness and sorrow, hiding his deep hatred. It was only because he couldn't control himself that he revealed a little. Jingwan sighed softly in her heart. His acting skills were superb. If she didn't know the truth, Jingwan felt that she would most likely be touched. He said so much just to play the emotional card. However, it was really a pity that he met such an extraordinary man like Li Hongyuan. Whether it was Lu Tingdi, imperial noble consort Su, or his birth mother, all his feelings for these people had been wiped clean in his previous life. Although he once wondered if he would be in a different situation if his birth mother was still alive, he didn't feel anything even after he found out that his father killed his mother because he was a foreigner, much less now. In Clan head Pei's opinion, Li Hongyuan really wanted to know everything about his mother. However, perhaps it was because of the resentment of abandoning him that he didn't want to open his mouth and ask, so he borrowed his wife's mouth. However, Clan head Pei couldn't see any clues from his face, so he couldn't be sure. Just as Jingwan was about to say something, Li Hongyuan suddenly said, "Enough?" Although he was a little cold compared to others, he was still much better. As the saying goes, act to act. Jingwan stared blankly, then immediately smiled and said, "If Wang Ye doesn't want to listen, you can choose not to listen, but Chia is very interested." Li Hongyuan sneered at her. He said he is the Pei clan's clan head, so he is the Pei clan's clan head? You believe whatever he says. Wang Fei, when did you become so gullible? Not to mention that clan head Pei was choked. Jingwan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Who would joke about this? It's easy to verify whether this old gentleman is the Pei clan's clan head. Moreover, even if he ate a bear's heart and leopard's gall, there's no reason to deceive you. Li Hongyuan coldly snorted. Jiangnan's #1 noble clan, the clan head is holed up in a water bandit's nest and still calls the wind and summons the rain. With the attitude of a big boss, he specializes in doing things like crowing chickens and stealing dogs. It doesn't matter if Jin Qinwang insults us, but how can he insult the clan head? But just as his voice fell, someone angrily opened his mouth. Okay, so it wasn't suspicion but ridicule. Clan head Pei raised his hand. Don't be rude to Wang Ye. Wang Ye has misunderstood. Although they bear the reputation of being water bandits, they have never done anything illegal. It's only because of some special reasons that they can't settle down in other places. Borrowing the name of water bandits, it's just that they need a place to settle down, that's all. Oh, this was doing a good deed. Li Hongyuan chuckled. This was real mockery. Based on the ability of Jiangnan's #1 noble clan, wouldn't they be able to arrange a group of troublesome people? Not to mention other things, even if it was an official slave, it wouldn't be too difficult to operate. Now that they've arranged a group of people here to be water bandits, it's just to deceive these people who have been used by you with bad intentions and are deeply grateful to you. Clan Head Pei knew what Li Hongyuan meant, but he didn't care too much about this. This kind of thing everyone was well aware. His explanation was for Li Hongyuan to hear. The main point was that these people didn't do bad things, that's all. As for whether they would do something else, perhaps if they did, these water bandits wouldn't realize what they did, whether it was good or bad. Those who participated in the bloody struggle for the throne wouldn't be unable to see through this, so they simply didn't care. Arriving at the water stronghold, this was indeed a residence that was mostly built on water. It looked simple and unadorned, but as a whole it had a different kind of charm. And Jingwan quite liked it. And Li Hongyuan disliked it very much. Standing in the largest and best room that was specially reserved for the clan head, Li Hongyuan casually swept a few glances. Someone come, go and unload the things from the boat. Jingwan wanted to face palm. Wangya is preparing to stay here for a while. Stay for 2 days. Some people need to be given more time. Li Hongyuan said without any reservation. Jingwan didn't speak. In her view, some people should include Lu Qingdi, imperial concubine Su, Li Hongyuan's brothers Tongzhou, Shannon, and even the entire Jiangnan officials, and Sun Yilin. Those who were anxious and worried were even more anxious and worried. Those who were happy were twice as happy. The former gave them a surprise when they were on the brink of despair. The latter gave them a fatal blow when they thought they were finally safe. Facing such a capricious husband who loved to play with people, Jingwan could only sigh silently. Clan Head Pei was quite happy and immediately ordered people to help. After all, according to his understanding, the things that this grandson needed were not just a little bit. At the same time, that big boat also needed to be concealed a little. It was too conspicuous. Under normal circumstances, no one would enter the tributary. However, this was a special situation. Although it was said that the Chongzhou government's government army was clearing out the water bandits downstream, because they couldn't confirm the exact location of the attack on Jinwangya, they wouldn't let go of this tens of li section of the road. Although the closer they got to the river, the less intensive the search was, they still had to be prepared. Only then did they know that there was another world nearby. It was a huge cave covered by lush vines. When the boat was pushed in, it was properly placed. From the outside it couldn't be seen. However, the things that were unloaded from the boat made the water bandits dumbstruck. These things, many of them were things that the most knowledgeable among them had never seen before. Clan Head Pei stroked his beard. Although he had heard of his grandson's extravagant etiquette, when he heard it he didn't take it seriously. Seeing the scene, he couldn't remain calm. A big man being so luxurious and enjoying himself to this extent, was there really no problem? Well, Clan Head Pei had to admit that although it was luxurious, it wasn't tacky. Those treasures and furnishings made his heart move. In this regard, Jin Wangya was absolutely worthy of the rumor. Although Li Hongyuan's goal was Clan Head Pei, he didn't want to pay attention to him at all. For him, this seemed to be a suitable place for him to settle down and carry out his plan. In the capital, the news had already been received. Luqing Emperor was furious and almost overturned the imperial case. He didn't give anyone a chance to dissuade him and directly ordered Tongzhou and Shannon counties to search with all their might. He said, if Jin Wangya is well, they will be well, otherwise, https://11/11807/6653557. Chapter 295. Lu Qingdi's unfinished words. Everyone knew that it was only the severity of the situation. However, at this time they all thought of the worst direction of the situation. It must be known that when the imperial Gui Fei died, although it was not related to the court, but people in a rage would usually use the word take out their anger to the extreme. Lu Qingdi, as the emperor of the 9 and 5, had no scruples. The court and the harem could be said to be full of mourning. The current Jin Qinhuang was the treasure in Lu Qingdi's palm. If something happened to him, or if it was because he was attacked in the middle of his mission, it would be said that it was done by water bandits. However, the number of people who would be connected to his mission was definitely not in the minority. The consequences would naturally be even more unimaginable. Who knew if he would, in a fit of anger, cut off the heads of all the related personnel? Therefore, some people's expectations were a bit too perfect and they were happy a bit too early. When they received the urgent imperial edict, the officials of the two counties almost fainted. Did they underestimate the position of Jin Qinhuang in the emperor's heart? Originally, the majority of people were far from losing their heads in the salt policy. Now that something happened to Jin Qinhuang, they might even lose their lives? Then what was the point of this scheme? Especially the pleading memorials from the officials of Kai Mingfu. They had been handed in early, but because it was not an urgent submission, it had not reached the emperor's desk. After receiving the imperial edict, they hoped that someone would be able to block the memorials. The emperor was in a rage and had originally opened fire on all sides. If this memorial was handed in, wouldn't it be letting the emperor focus fire on Kai Mingfu? The people in the cabinet should be clear about the consequences of this memorial. Moreover, everyone was more or less a community of interest, so they should help, right? Unfortunately, their thinking was too perfect. If the cabinet didn't have Li Hongyuan's people, perhaps it would really be as they wished. However, Wan Ruizhong, the cabinet's grand secretary who appeared to be neutral on the surface, was essentially serving Jin Qinhuang. After receiving Jin Qinhuang's secret letter, how could he possibly obstruct it? He would only not mind the matter becoming bigger. Faced with everyone's obstruction, Wan Ruizhong only said, "The memorial can only be temporarily suppressed. Sooner or later, it will be delivered to the emperor's hands. Temporarily it is fine. If Jin Qinhuang is unharmed, then it is naturally best. If it is confirmed that Jin Qinhuang, at that time the cabinet that suppressed the memorial will inevitably be purged." Sure enough, everyone who tried to stop him remained silent. Compared to him, other people, even if they had a close relationship with him, could only stand aside. Wan Ruizhong grasped this point and hit the nail on the head. Then these memorials were naturally handed over to Lu Qingdi. As expected, it was like adding fuel to the fire. Lu Qingdi exploded again. Although he already knew what happened in Kaming Prefecture, he didn't know the details. "You're asking for punishment now? What were you doing earlier?" Lu Qingdi didn't care how many days the memorials were delayed on the road. He only knew that when his son's life was unknown, a group of people asked for punishment after the fact. In his opinion, this was not asking for punishment, but trying to clear their names and shirk responsibility. If they really had the time to write memorials to ask for punishment, why didn't they protect his son after the accident to prevent another accident? When the accident happened again, why didn't they think about searching or saving people? Why did they write a bunch of nonsense here? The Kaming Prefecture had 30,000 official soldiers, but they let 100 bandits sneak into the city and rush into the prince's residence. What the hell were they doing? This was also a time of peace. If there was a war and such a thing happened, wouldn't it be the same as handing over the city to others? Well, this was a bit of sophistry. If there was a war, the gate would be tightly shut. How could more than 100 unknown people sneak into the city? Moreover, they were not unknown people at all. However, would Lu Qingdi think about this now? He wouldn't. He only thought about his son. He and his most beloved woman's only son. He understood very well that the latter was the main point. The governor of the Kaming Prefecture was the first to be affected. He was directly demoted by 3 ranks by Lu Qingdi. This was only temporary. If it was confirmed that Prince Jin had met with misfortune, he would definitely become bald. If other things were found, such as the salt policy, such as the assassination of Prince Jin, his entire family would be investigated. Other people, other than those who didn't write memorials to ask for punishment, were all demoted by 1 or 2 ranks. In the end, Governor Sun's family was the biggest. Even the military power was temporarily handed over to his hands. The expression of the governor of the Kaming Prefecture who was handed over his military power was brilliant beyond compare. Governor Su was his old rival. The two of them had been fighting for more than a day or two. Governor Su did not reveal his strength, but the governor of the Kaming Prefecture never dared to look down on him. He had thought that he might lose in some matters, but he didn't expect that this loss was too ruthless. He might not be able to climb up again. Not only that, he had now fallen under the other party's command. The memorials to ask for punishment did not belong to this old dog Su. In other people's memorials to ask for punishment, he overstepped his authority and did things that were against the rules and would even be punished. Because it was to rescue Prince Jin, it was not meritorious. Governor Darren must be very pleased with himself. The governor of the Kaming Prefecture. "Oh, wrong," the former governor said while gnashing his teeth. "Pleased? What is there to be pleased with? Whether Prince Jin is alive or dead is still unknown. We should do our best to find Prince Jin." Governor Su's face was stern. At this time, we must not be unable to distinguish the priority. These words seemed to be reminding the other party what was the most important thing at the moment. The anger in the former governor's heart was even more intense. Even if this old dog ridiculed him, it was still better than seeing his hypocritical face. But that worry and fear was indeed even more intense. The more he wanted Prince Jin's life before, the more he hoped that the other party was still safe and sound at this time. The Kaming prefecture dispatched 5,000 prefecture soldiers and followed the canal downwards. This was Governor Su's order to expand the scope of the search. Compared to other people, Governor Su's heart was not that calm. It was only because he sensed that Prince Jin was not ordinary. He was not sure if this was just a play arranged by Prince Jin. He did not want Li Hongyuan to die in the Kaming prefecture, but it did not mean that he wanted Li Hongyuan to live. Forcing Li Hongyuan away was within his plan. Making a move on the canal was also a part of the plan. However, colluding with the officials and bandits was not in his plan. When he did things, he always wanted to ensure a 100% success rate. The water bandits were easy to use, but they were not trusted by him. Moreover, there was also the risk of being caught. But the problem was his people did not have time to make a move. Not only that, they had completely lost track of him. Was he already dead? Or was he caught? The former was still okay, but if it was the latter, with such a scope of search, it was only a matter of time before they were found. However, it was almost 2 days before Li Hongyuan rested. To a certain extent, the life and death of this group of fake water bandits who were taken care of by Clan Head Pei completely depended on Li Hongyuan's thoughts. Of course, Li Hongyuan's thoughts were completely in the hands of Jingwan. Would Jingwan let these hundreds of men, women, old and young die? If they were real water bandits who committed crimes, or because they had committed a serious crime and had nowhere to go, they were gathered here by Clan Het Pei. Then even if they did not want their lives, Jingwan would let them go to the place where they should go. For example, prison or a bitter and cold place. The problem now was they did not have either of these. Clan Het Pei wanted to say something to Li Hongyuan. However, Li Hongyuan was now impervious to oil and salt. Even because the other party was too noisy, he once let the guards put a knife on his neck. Clan Het Pei clearly felt that if he said another word, Li Hongyuan would really kill him without hesitation. Speaking of which, he had always been secretive about coming here. If he really died here, it would be equivalent to dying in vain. The Pei family would not even be able to find his corpse. Before Clan Het Pei could retreat, the people of the water bandits had already rushed out. Even if the guards drew their swords and threatened them, they would not retreat a single step. Clan leader Pei hurriedly tried to dissuade him. His face was filled with helplessness. "Your Highness, it's all my fault this time. Please be magnanimous and let them off this time. They're all people with hard lives and they're kind-hearted. If you have to do something to appease your anger, you can do it to me. I won't complain at all." There was a hint of pleading in his voice. The water bandits looked at Clan Het Pei with red eyes. They were all very touched. Then they looked at Li Hongyuan with hatred, looking like they would fight to the end. Speaking of which, this person, if he could do what Clan Het Pei did, he could be considered a big winner, right? Li Hongyuan looked at Clan Het Pei with a faint smile. He did not care about this group of unruly people at all. Jingwan was also not frightened by this hostile situation. She saw that the situation was getting more and more tense, as if it was about to explode at any moment. Jingwan reached out and patted Li Hongyuan's arm. She said somewhat helplessly, "Your Highness, that's enough. Fighting is fighting, don't really kill people." She sounded like she was coaxing a child who was throwing a tantrum. Li Hongyuan was immediately unhappy. He said somewhat angrily, "Who's fighting?" Jingwan looked at him with a faint smile. "Wasn't it obvious? Wasn't it obvious?" Li Hongyuan shot to his feet. His expression was very ugly. He glared at Jingwan as if he wanted to swallow her alive. After a moment, he did not say anything and left in a huff. Jingwan sighed helplessly and waved her hand. "You can all leave first. I want to have a few words with old Master Pei." The group of guards naturally had no objections, and the people of the water stronghold left one after another after receiving the signal from Chief Pei. Jingwan personally poured a cup of tea for Clan Het Pei. She slowly said, "Old Master Pei, don't blame His Highness. He has a knot in his heart. He more or less has some resentment in his heart. He was raised by noble Consort Su since he was born. Although noble Consort Su treats him like her own son, It is said that there is no familial affection in the imperial family. Furthermore, noble consort Su has a son. Who knows what she is thinking in her heart? Perhaps she is just using His Highness to consolidate his favor and fight for her son. Although His Majesty dotes on him, His Majesty is His Majesty first and His Majesty is His Majesty's father. The other princes did not have an external family or a biological mother. Even if some of them did not have either, they were not favored by His Majesty. They were invisible in the eyes of others and did not pose a threat. Relatively speaking, they were actually more free. His Highness's favor was the most enviable, but he had no one to back him up. Although he seemed to have unlimited glory on the surface, he was actually the one who had the most difficult life out of all the princes. Now that he was an adult, his temperament had become more tenacious. However, he must have had some dreams when he was young, but they were never realized. Now, in the depths of his heart there might be a desire. In fact, coming here this time was the best proof. Because when he first received the news, the prince seemed to have sensed something. He appeared calm, but as the person who slept next to him, she could feel the anxiety and impatience in his heart. To be honest, His Highness does not lack people who can help him now. What he lacks is family who are sincere to him. I don't know why old Mr. Pei would invite His Highness in such a special way. It's purely for his sake. He's your grandson by blood, your relative. You're only doing this because you can't meet him openly. I believe that His Highness's attitude towards you will change sooner or later. However, if it's for other reasons, it's best that old Mr. Pei keep your mouth shut. His Highness is especially sensitive and repulsed by such things. That's all I have to say. I will take my leave now. After Jingwan finished speaking, she left without waiting for a response. Clan leader Pei did not react. He sat there in a daze. He basically believed Jin Qinhuang Fei's words. However, he wasn't sure if it was this granddaughter-in-law who felt sorry for her husband and told him, or if it was the two of them who colluded to play the emotional card and gain more benefits. In his opinion, the latter was more likely. After all, this couple had only been married for slightly more than 2 months. His grandson did not look like a kind person. How could he reveal his past so easily? Furthermore, in clan leader Pei's eyes, they were affectionate while traveling with his wife. In his eyes, this was not true love. It was just a cover-up. However, no matter what, one thing was certain. In order to achieve their goal, they had to show sincerity in any aspect. When they returned to their temporary lodging, Jingwan saw Li Hongyuan leaning against the chair and flipping through a book in boredom. There was no trace of anger on his face. When he sensed Jingwan coming in, he did not even lift his eyelids. What did Wan say about your husband in front of outsiders? Jingwan walked over and took the book from his hand. She looked at him with a hint of ridicule. Your Highness, your acting skills are getting better and better. Is that so? Wan is also getting impatient. Keep up the good work. Jingwan chuckled and stopped talking. There was no point in talking about this. Besides, the possibility of her losing was too high. She roughly repeated what she had said just now. Am I really that bad? Your husband has always been willful in the open and in the dark. It's not that easy to make me suffer. Yes. Who do you think you are, Your Highness? Only you can make others suffer. Tell me, what do you think clan leader Pei will think? Damn it. If you want a real family, don't count on him. No matter what, I'm important to him and he's useless to me. I can't let him take the initiative. If I don't make him bleed, he can forget about getting any benefits from me. Then let him settle everything after this. Of course. https://11/11807/6653562. Chapter 296. It was obvious that this place would be found sooner or later. To cover up Li Hongyuan's intentional disappearance, and to protect the people of the water stronghold, they needed a reasonable explanation. This explanation was not something that could be settled with just a few words. There were many things that needed to be arranged. If they didn't hurry, it would be too late. This was clearly a matter between both parties. After all, if they couldn't cover it up, it would be extremely disadvantageous for both parties. Now that Li Hongyuan confidently handed over everything to clan leader Pei, the other party had no choice but to take over. Who let the one who needed to get closer to him and not Li Hongyuan? Li Hongyuan didn't come forward. The follow-up matters were all handed over to Jingwan. Jingwan didn't say anything. At this time her own husband was acting Tsundra. Naturally, she would follow through to the end. However, Jingwan didn't expose the point that someone's heart was really Tsundra. Of course, it wasn't because of clan leader Pei. To be specific, it was probably because someone wanted to be lazy. The result of Jingwan's discussion with clan leader Pei was that Jin Qinhuang was attacked. Under the protection of the guards, he entered the mountains. The attackers chased him relentlessly for 2 days. When everyone was exhausted and heavily injured, they met the people of the water stronghold. Thus, what should be covered up was covered up and what should be covered up was covered up. It was just that the details of the arrangements were quite difficult. However, Jingwan then found that she thought too much. What should be arranged, clan leader Pei had already arranged. Obviously, he had already thought of this. In the discussion just now, he gave what he thought was a relatively reasonable arrangement. Because it was similar to what Jingwan thought, naturally there was no reason to disagree. For example, the location of the attack had been moved 10 miles downwards, and the boat that was submerged in the water had been moved downwards. Jingwan didn't want to ask him how he did it, but this section of the canal had been sealed and no one was allowed to pass through. It should be easier to operate than expected. Another example, after entering the mountains on the escape route, there would be traces of fighting from time to time. There were also many corpses along the way. What we need to deal with now is the things that His Highness and Her Highness brought along, as well as the people who followed them, clan head Pei said calmly. Jingwan didn't look too good. Corpse, where did this corpse come from? It couldn't be a coincidence. Obviously, Patriarch Pei treated human life like grass. There are many birds and beasts in the mountains. All you need to do is leave some blood stains, rags and the like. Old Master Pei, do you really have to go to this extent? But clan head Pei didn't care. This old man knows that Princess Consort is kind-hearted, but a forgery has to be realistic. There are many smart people. Since there were people who wanted His Highness' life, then they wouldn't let go of any clues. You should know that His Highness brought many people with him and they were all quite skilled. To be able to force so many people to retreat, the other party must have a large number of people. With so many people lost in the mountains, how could a few bloodstains and cloth make up for it? However, esteemed Wang Fei can be at ease. In the end, it's just a fake. There aren't as many corpses as you think. There definitely wouldn't be fewer corpses. Jingwan's expression didn't improve. Her face was cold. Since old Master Pei has already thought it through, then there's nothing more to say. Most of the people by His Highness' side will be sent away, but they can't be too far away from His Highness. I'm sure old Master Pei has already prepared a place for them to stay. In addition, His Highness is precious and can enjoy himself. Now that we have to sink these things with the ship, even if we salvage them later, I'm afraid that some of them can't be used. Our Pei family will compensate His Highness for all his losses. We just have to inconvenience His Highness for a while. That's great. Jingwan flicked her sleeves and left. Esteemed Wang, clan head Pei called out to her. Is there anything else? Jingwan didn't turn around. She just tilted her head slightly. She didn't even call out to him. Her disapproval of clan head Pei's actions couldn't be more obvious. Clan head Pei acted as if he didn't see her displeasure and continued to speak in a neither fast nor slow manner. Those who stayed behind, after all, fought a hard battle to protect His Highness and Her Highness from being injured. How could they not be injured at all? Esteemed Wang Fei, don't you think so? Everything was done for His Highness' sake. Esteemed Wang Fei, please reconsider. Jingwan left with a dark expression. She didn't know how many lives had been lost because of her. Now, under her watch, she had to watch them deliberately injure a perfectly fine person. A cold could be fatal. Moreover, it was already May. Wounds could easily become infected. Who knew if there would be serious consequences? Clan head Pei didn't comment on Jingwan's anger. He picked up his teacup and took a sip. Then he placed the teacup in front of his eyes and studied it carefully as if he was looking at a treasure. Too soft-hearted. In some aspects he had to admit that his grandson's Wang Fei was very good. However, in other aspects she was still lacking. In the current situation she couldn't be a virtuous wife. She was too benevolent and wasn't suitable to be the mother of the country. So it's time to change? Looking at Jingwan's cold expression, Li Hongyuan knew that the old man must have done something to make her not angry anymore. Wan, don't be angry. I'll avenge you. You don't know anything and you're already thinking of revenge? Maybe he didn't do anything wrong. Jingwan sneered. My Wan is unhappy, so it's his fault. Moreover, do I need a reason to punish someone? He said it as if it was a matter of course. Jingwan narrowed her eyes slightly as she looked at Li Hongyuan. Suddenly, she realized that this man was indeed Clan Head Pei's grandson. He was very conceited and self-centered. Clan Head Pei was relatively introverted, while Li Hongyuan was more arrogant and flamboyant. In addition, she was also the center of this man's heart. Moreover, she occupied a more important position. Even if she had to do something that was inherently unpleasant, she wouldn't be angry at him because of their closeness. Did this mean that she finally found the origin of Li Hongyuan's ego? Jingwan and Li Hongyuan briefly explained the outcome of their discussion. Li Hongyuan naturally knew why Jingwan was upset. In fact, this was basically within his expectations. However, there were some things that didn't need to be said out loud. Otherwise, Wanwan would only feel more uncomfortable. She was lacking in these aspects and was no match for that old man. As long as she didn't harden her heart, she would never be a match for this kind of person. Li Hongyuan also knew that she wouldn't end up like this and would always be a loser. But so what? He could deal with these people. Those who bullied his wife naturally had to pay a heavy price. Since things have already come to this, don't think too much. Jingwan pursed her lips. She knew that this was the only way, but her heart couldn't calm down in a short period of time. As for the matter of self-injury, Wangfei, it's not good. You Darren and the others. Qingju hurriedly rushed in. It should be known that when Qingju followed Jingwan into Jin Wangfu, she restrained herself as much as possible. She was afraid that she would be rash and lose face for her family's young lady. To be so anxious at this time, it could be seen that it wasn't a small matter. What happened? Jingwan quickly asked. Yu Darren and the bodyguard Dage and the others got into a fight. Injured. Jingwan was startled at first. How could they get into a fight without any reason? Not to mention Yu Zhongqing, Li Hongyuan's bodyguards, which one of them wasn't a person with self-restraint. On second thought, something wasn't right. What about old Mr. Pei? Is he also present? Thinking of this possibility, Jingwan's expression became unusually ugly. She couldn't make a decision on her own and was even worried that she would affect Yuan's decision, so she acted on her own initiative and directly looked for the people below. Yu Zhongqing was here to protect Jin Wangfu. As for the other bodyguards, to them their lives weren't their own. If their master needed it, don't mention deliberately getting injured, even if they had to risk their lives they wouldn't blink an eye. That old thing was sure of this point, so he dared to swagger in to look for people after she left. Based on the basic respect that the younger generation had for their elders at this moment, it was completely snuffed out. Jingwan hurriedly went out. Li Hongyuan didn't stop her and unhurriedly got up. He also straightened his clothes that didn't have any wrinkles, and then lifted his feet to go out. Jingwan's speed was very fast. Her original intention was to stop Yu Zhongqing and the others, but when she arrived it was too late. The scuffle was already over. That's right, it was a scuffle, the kind where the attack wasn't on guard. After all, only a real fight could create realistic wounds. More than a dozen people, because the clothes they wore were darker in color, but because of the blood stains in addition to the large gashes that were cut open by the blade, it looked very obvious. Jingwan covered her eyes and couldn't say any words of reprimand, because it wasn't their fault at all. In their view, it was natural to do this. Qingju, go and take out the best wound medicine. You all quickly go and treat the wounds. Wangfei Nyang, in this water stronghold, taking out the best wound medicine is unrealistic. Pei Clan head stroked his beard as he spoke. That's enough. The wounds from a few days ago showed no signs of improvement. That's unrealistic. Jingwan said coldly. And all of you, have you forgotten who your master is? You do whatever an outsider tells you to do? The guards were stunned. Indeed, no matter what happened in the end, it was up to their master to decide. They shouldn't have followed Yu Zhongqing's decision just because they thought it was right. They looked at each other and knelt down on one knee. Please punish us, mistress. I'll remember this first. After this mission is over, I'll punish him when we return to the capital. However, I hope that this will be the last time, Jingwan said firmly. Yes. Pei Clan head looked on from the side, but he was very dissatisfied. How could a woman reprimand her husband's guards? This wasn't as simple as simply overstepping. Wangfei Nyang, Jingwan's cold eyes swept over. This Wangfei is speaking. You're just a commoner, how dare you interrupt? Is this the etiquette of your big family? Is this the seniority of your big family? I call you old mister because you're an elder. Don't take advantage of your seniority to point fingers at this Wang Fei. Pei clan head was choked by Jingwan's words. He had always been a person who wouldn't change his expression even if a mountain collapsed in front of him, but at this moment he couldn't keep his face straight. Although what she said was the truth and although Pei Shi's situation was unstable, no one had ever dared to say such things to him. Jiangnan's 4 counties and 28 prefectures, even the governor and the inspector general had to be polite to him. Now that he was thrown to the ground and stepped on by a little girl who was his grandchild, it would be strange if he remained indifferent. However, he couldn't find the words to refute. In terms of status, she was a superior Wang Fei. He was indeed just a commoner. This was what he hated the most. In terms of seniority, he wasn't her elder. Even if he was Jin Qinhuang's maternal grandfather, there was no relationship between them in name. So what if she didn't respect him? It was true that Qi Yuan had a tradition of respecting the elderly, but this wasn't a reason to lecture a Qinhuang Fei. Li Hongyuan looked on with interest. What was it? His wife's appearance when she showed her might was really attractive. However, his wife had always had a good temper. It was rare to see someone who could anger her to this extent. This Pei clan head was probably the first, and he needed to remember this. As for why his wife had angered his grandfather, it had nothing to do with him at all. Li Hongyuan stepped forward and stroked Jingwan's back to comfort her. Don't worry, I have people who are proficient in medicine. It's just an external injury, it won't cause any serious consequences. Obviously, with the previous years of indirect understanding and daily contact after marriage, Li Hongyuan had a good grasp of Jingwan's mentality. Jingwan slightly relaxed and nodded. There are some things that I need to arrange. Right now she didn't want to see this Pei clan head at all. Go ahead. Li Hongyuan agreed. It's okay to spoil this woman a little, but if you spoil her too much she will become arrogant. Your Highness. What does my pleasure have to do with outsiders? Li Hongyuan casually interrupted him. The princess consort hopes that my family will treat me with sincerity. That's why she humbles herself and respects you. Don't tell me you think that your so-called status as the Pei clan head is enough for her to talk to you? I've seen plenty of self-righteous people. What I enjoy is her sincerity. I can't bear to spoil her mood, so I didn't say anything. Don't tell me you think that my silence means that I've acquiesced? I may have some expectations for family relations, but you're a person who prioritizes benefits and wants to make use of me. Do you expect me to obediently come knocking on your door? Who's more stupid than the other? Things have been arranged. Get as far away as you can. If you make her unhappy again, don't blame me for making the entire Pei clan unhappy. Li Hongyuan's words didn't arouse much of a reaction from Pei clan head. Your Highness's importance to the princess consort is really beyond my expectations. His words were a little ironic. In his opinion, this was still an act and the goal was always the same. However, since some words were exposed, it was also good. Pei clan head didn't intend to use the so-called family relations to achieve his goal. He always believed that there were no eternal enemies or friends, only eternal interests. However, Your Highness did a good job of burning the bridge after crossing the river. Based on your care for the princess consort, you certainly wouldn't order people to hurt themselves. This old man played the villain and helped Your Highness solve it. So what? Do you expect me to be grateful? https://11/118076653565. Mobile Edition. Chapter 297. So what? You still expect Ben Wang to be grateful? For people like Li Hongyuan, even if you gave him everything he wanted, he might not say a word of thanks. Wang Ye is thinking too much. Lao Fu just wanted to say that if Wang Ye has something that is inconvenient for you to do, Lao Fu can do it for you. The meaning of these words could not be more obvious. Just like how Li Hongyuan pointed out that the other party was using him, he no longer hid his true purpose. Li Hongyuan sneered. It was obvious that he was ridiculing him. Without saying anything, he turned and left. Pei clan head could not help but frown. He did not quite understand Li Hongyuan's meaning. It did not seem to be a simple distrust. Li Hongyuan had said before, whether or not he was used by the Pei clan, first look at his mood, then look at the Pei clan's sincerity. His mood right now could not be said to be bad, but it was not good for this Pei clan head. As for sincerity, was it just based on one sentence? Moreover, did Li Hongyuan need him to do it for him? Completely not. Pei clan head did not understand for the time being, but he did not make a fuss about it. He was very clear that 100 words were not as good as a single action. Moreover, he only said one sentence. Jin Wangye's purpose for this trip to Jiangnan he was also very clear. Thus, to let him properly experience Pei clan's ability he should not be indifferent. Pei clan had arranged the follow-up matters and did not ask any more questions. He did not leave. After all, the canal was now sealed and could not be passed through. He could not leave through the mountains. That kind of crossing over the mountains, was it something that an old man like him who lived like a prince could bear? He only changed his attire and hid in the water stronghold, becoming an unremarkable member of the water stronghold. Other than the dozen or so injured guards including Yu Zhongqing, the rest were all hidden according to the original plan. Needless to say, those who were originally in the dark were all hidden, and those who were in the open were all hidden. However, in this way it was still a little troublesome. After all, there were too many people. If there were too many people missing, they would have to replenish from other places. This replenishment could be planted by spies, and it would be troublesome to clean up the spies. Jingwan's 6 maids were divided into 3 groups, and 2 groups were taken away by the others. Jingwan's wet nurse stayed and Nanny Gong also left together. According to Li Hongyuan, he wanted Nanny Gong to stay and take care of Jingwan. However, Jingwan's wet nurse's health was far inferior to Nanny Gong's. If she was not careful, she might lose her life. In addition, Nanny Gong's wet nurse was also packed up. In this way, it was more reasonable to scatter the people in the process of hunting. After that, they would find a suitable opportunity to gather the people. The people who were hidden were naturally the dead people. This section of the river stretched for dozens of miles. At least Jingwan did not know how large the range of the mountains that stretched to both sides of the river was. It was also not a small project to move all the valuables and then ship them out of the sunken ship. They also had to pray that they would not bump into the soldiers outside. However, this had nothing to do with Li Hongyuan. The luxurious things were gone and they were all changed into plain clothes. If it were not for the fact that the clothes inside were not changed, Li Hongyuan's face would be as black as the bottom of a pot. Of course, this had nothing to do with him. It was mainly because of Jingwan. He was afraid that if he was not careful, Jingwan's skin would be worn out by the rough linen clothes. Jingwan pulled back her sleeves. She looked at Li Hongyuan speechlessly and ignored him. The people who found them came faster than expected. They did not come in from the river but came out from the mountains. They were led by the water bandits. Not only that, the leader was directly carried on someone's back. However, when she saw that person, Jingwan could not help but feel her heart tighten. It was very unexpected. Li Hongyuan's face was quite ugly. He reached out and grabbed the other person's neck without hesitation. As long as he used more strength, he could really break it. "Ah Yuan, don't." Jingwan seemed to be prepared. She hurried forward and grabbed his hand. Li Hongyuan looked coldly at Jingwan. He was even angrier. To be able to make Li Hongyuan have such a big reaction, it was likely that he would appear here. Obviously, other than Sun Yilin, there was no other candidate. Originally, it was better not to meet him. However, his appearance did not seem to be too surprising. As far as Li Hongyuan was concerned, he did not ask him to bring his wife away from anyone. At this time, Sun Yilin had already sunk into a semi-conscious state and looked very terrible. However, he was still mumbling something in his sleep. However, the sensitive people could easily guess. "Miss Luo?" It was no wonder Li Hongyuan said that he had lost control. Jingwan pulled him. "Ah Yuan, if he loses his life like this, I should really remember him for a lifetime. It is not because of anything else but because of the guilt. You understand?" Li Hongyuan's expression was abnormally frightening. The evil aura around him was really like the most ferocious beast that chose to devour people. The surrounding people were all trembling. Even those who were further away, such as Yu Zhongqing clan leader Pei and the others, were all shocked. Only Jingwan did not budge an inch. "Ah Yuan." There was a hint of pleading in her voice. She knew the anger in his heart. Because if their positions were switched, if Sun Yilin was replaced by another woman, the anger in her heart would also be monstrous. However, in reality, this assumption was not likely to be true. She believed that if she wanted to kill a love rival, he would be more likely to clap his hands and cheer. But in the end, she was different from him. It was not that she did not care, nor was she able to tolerate her other half being coveted by others. In the end, Li Hongyuan could ignore human life, but she could not. What's more, Sun Yilin was in this state because of her. Even if no one asked him to do so, everything was brought upon by him. However, there were only a few people in the world who could remain unmoved. Feelings that she could not and would not accept naturally could not be trampled on. When the other party did not do anything wrong to her or to anyone else, how could she be harsh and ignore the other party's life? Li Hongyuan shook off Sun Yilin and turned to leave. No one dared to come within one zhang of him. Jingwan rubbed her temples with a headache. This time it would not be easy to coax him and appease him. Moreover, if she did not chase after him now, his anger would only increase. However, if she did not make arrangements for the person who had angered Li Hongyuan to this extent, no one would care about him. Take young Master Sun away. Treat him carefully and familiarize him. Do not neglect him. Other than Li Hongyuan, Jingwan was the boss. Naturally, no one would refute her words. In any case, even if it was Wang Ye's anger, there was still her, the Wang Fei. They knew what kind of temperament Jingwan had. She would not vent her anger on them and vent her anger on them. Sun Yilin just happened to open his eyes at this time. She did not know if it was because he saw Jingwan, but he suddenly seemed to be completely awake. He grabbed Jingwan's arm. Miss Luo? I'm not dreaming, am I? The worry and apprehension in his eyes were not the least bit fake. The group of soldiers and generals who had originally followed Sun Yilin to search for the person wished that they were deaf and blind. That was, from the time they left Chongzhou Prefecture until now. In these few days, the provincial governor had not closed his eyes and had not eaten anything. After confirming that Jin Wangye's accident had nothing to do with those 2 or 3 waves of water bandits, he did not participate in the suppression of the bandits. He continued to search along the canal. Every place that could be entered into the mountains was not let go. Every place was carefully inspected by experienced people in an attempt to find clues. Speaking of which, going from the canal to the mountains under normal circumstances, no one would do this kind of thing. Therefore, every time he was disappointed, he would become more and more anxious. His eyes were bloodshot. He had already reached his limit, but he still persisted and refused to close his eyes. Originally, she thought that he really had taboo feelings towards Jin Wangye. Otherwise, he was the Gongzi of Dinggua Gongfu who was deeply favored by the emperor. He clearly had a boundless future, but he was sent away at a marriageable age. No matter how she looked at it, it did not seem right. If it was because of Jin Wangye. Jin Wangye was married and went away, it seemed to make sense. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that this was the case. Looking at it now, well, the one who was really missed was not Jin Wangye but Jin Wang Fei. The person he admired was married and became a woman. It was no wonder that he did not want to stay there sadly. Stop thinking about Jin Wangye's rage just now. She felt that she could not protect her little life. It's me, you're not dreaming. However, shouldn't Sun Gongzi call me Jin Wang Fei? Jingwan chuckled, but there was no smile in her eyes. She gently brushed away his hand. Sun Gongzi has really worked hard to find Wangye. Please rest well. Wangye is protected by the heavens and is fine. Sun Yilin only felt a burning pain in his lungs. He understood Jingwan's meaning. Her words were good for everyone. His current words and actions were already impolite, but he still could not bear it. The pain in his eyes almost overflowed, but he could only forcibly hold it back. It's good that you're fine, it's good that you're fine. After saying this, Sun Yilin seemed to have been drained of all his strength. His body went soft, his eyes closed, and he completely fainted. Jingwan was also shocked and quickly had people carry him into the room. After confirming that Sun Yilin's life was not in danger, he was just overly tired and had not eaten for many days. In addition, he had been poisoned by the snake venom. Now that the string was stretched taut, he completely collapsed. Jingwan breathed a sigh of relief. However, she was indeed fine. However, she reckoned that everyone would not be fine. Jingwan felt even more of a headache. https://11/11807/6653566. Chapter 298. Although it was a headache, she still had to face it. Of course, Jingwan had never thought of pretending to be an ostrich and not going to see him. Firstly, the consequences would be more serious. Secondly, in Jingwan's philosophy, if there was a problem, it must be solved. Dragging it out or something else was absolutely not desirable. Moreover, that was her other half. Seeing him uncomfortable, Jingwan was also unable to be happy. As for those who found them, how to explain it to them, she didn't need to come forward. However, when Jingwan returned, Li Hongyuan was not in the room. Looking at it this way, his anger was really not ordinary. After asking for a while, no one knew where he went. The guards that were left behind were more or less injured. However, this was not the reason why they were resting. The reason why no one followed was completely because someone did not let them. That appearance of wanting to eat people was really not something that ordinary people could bear. Furthermore, they had always been absolutely obedient to the orders of the masses. At this time, they could only stand in front of Jingwan with their hands hanging down. However, it was not their responsibility. Not being able to protect their master's side was their fault. Don't blame you. Send people to look around. Jingwan rubbed her swollen temples. Jingwan and the others were not in a hurry. However, those people who had just found them upon hearing that Jin Qinhuang was missing, almost jumped up. It must be known that because of these few days facing the high pressure from above, they were simply throwing their lives away. They couldn't eat or sleep well, their hair was falling out in clumps. Now that they finally saw the person, their suspended hearts finally returned to their original position. Then they made such a scene. This heart really couldn't bear it. Even if their breathing was not even steady, they were still in a hurry to find the person. Because they were not familiar with the water stronghold, each and every one of them were like headless flies. The people of the water stronghold were baffled. What were they doing? Then the water stronghold was turned upside down, but they still didn't see the person. When they reported to Jingwan, Jingwan was extremely speechless. The people of the water stronghold are more familiar than you. There are hundreds of people, there must be someone who saw the whereabouts of Wang Ye. Don't you know how to open your mouth and ask? You're just randomly looking around like that? Everyone's expressions were rather interesting. They had been too anxious and had completely forgotten. At this moment they were so ashamed that they wanted to crawl into a hole and hide their faces. Sure enough, after casually asking around, he found out Li Hongyuan's whereabouts. He had left the water stockade and entered the mountains. Because of this, they couldn't sit still and were in a hurry to search. They came from the mountain ridge. Although they didn't go very deep and basically walked to the shortest route to the water stronghold, they still deeply felt the danger inside. On the other hand, Jingwan was very calm. Within a certain range of the water stockade, there definitely wouldn't be anything too dangerous. Although she hadn't seen Li Hongyuan's skills, she had seen him kill people, and he even had the battle record of fighting a tiger alone. So how could he be weak? Ordinary dangers couldn't do anything to him. Jingwan carefully inquired about the situation in that direction and found out that it was actually a valley about 2 miles long. Not far from the end there was a lake that was neither big nor small. Under normal circumstances, there would be some small animals roaming around. Because the water bandits often hunted, there were basically no large birds or beasts within 5 miles. Jingwan thanked her and then found 2 people to lead the way. Together they went into the mountains to search for Wang Ye. According to their intentions, they didn't want Jingwan to go. Jingwan only had one sentence. Do you have the confidence to find Wang Ye and bring him back? Alright, they all understood Jingwan's meaning. Finding him wasn't the main point, but after finding him, getting him back was the main point. They didn't dare to say a word. How could they get him back? Moreover, people with discerning eyes knew that Wang Ye was jealous. If Wang Fei didn't personally go, if they went forward, they would definitely be punished. Jingwan wasn't wearing cumbersome magnificent clothes now. She was dressed in cloth and was very capable. It was only going up the mountain, not climbing a cliff. It was a piece of cake. The troops split into 2. The majority of the people first went to look for Li Hongyuan, while the rest followed behind to protect Jingwan. They thought that the people behind would be very slow. Wang Fei, after all, was precious and delicate. Walking in the mountain forest, how could she be fast? Perhaps she would be out of breath after walking a few more steps. As a result, they soon found that they were thinking too much. Jin Qinhuang's speed wasn't much slower. Jin Qinhuang might not have walked along the valley, but went up the mountain from both sides. This assumption didn't happen. Soon news came from the front that the person had been found. He was by the lake, but they didn't dare to alarm him. The vegetation in the valley was relatively short. The closer it was to the lake, the taller the trees were. But at most they were only about a zhang tall, far from the height of towering giant trees. Through the gaps between the trees, Jingwan could faintly see Li Hongyuan's figure. He was sitting on a rock by the lake with one leg bent, inexplicably feeling a little bleak. Jingwan's heart subconsciously clenched and her footsteps involuntarily quickened. The other people consciously stopped and scattered around to ensure that they couldn't see or hear, and to isolate themselves from any danger. Li Hongyuan couldn't be more familiar with Jingwan's footsteps, but he still sat there motionless. However, only he knew the emotions flashing in his eyes, as well as the sinister and calculating. In fact, he was very clear that whether it was Sun Yilin or Qin Jingmin, they couldn't die. At least they couldn't die in his hands. There was originally no estrangement between him and Jingwan. If he killed them, it would instead breed estrangement. Perhaps it wouldn't be irreconcilable, but Jingwan's heart would definitely have a knot. Moreover, as Jingwan herself said, she would probably remember it for a lifetime. How could he allow it? In this way, the conflict would only deepen and develop to the point where it could get out of hand. This was definitely not what he wanted to see. Who made him unhappy? If he couldn't kill them, he would return it back 10 times, 100 times. It must be said that Li Hongyuan was currently the craziest but also the most rational. A madman wasn't scary, a rational person wasn't scary, but a rational madman could be quite scary. Jingwan approached and reached out to put her hand on his shoulder. "Ah Yuan?" Li Hongyuan was still indifferent. "Are you still angry?" Jingwan was actually a little helpless. She knew what he was concerned about, but this problem couldn't be solved at the moment. It was useless to say anything. She reached out and hugged him from behind. She leaned her cheek against the side of his head. "I'm sorry." Li Hongyuan was stunned. Why? The one who had the least reason to apologize was her. It couldn't be for Sun Yilin. If that were the case, he would really kill someone. Would Wanwan be so stupid? As a wife, isn't it my fault that I can't give my husband 100% sense of security? To be honest, Li Hongyuan didn't understand the word sense of security very well. At most, he could make a rough guess based on the meaning of the word. If he understood it completely, he would probably explode. "It has nothing to do with you, Wanwan. I shouldn't take my anger out on you. The one who should be apologizing is me. But Wanwan, I can't control myself. I won't allow anyone to spy on you. Even if I know that they will never take you away from me, I won't allow it." "Yes, I know. In fact, as a man of traditional etiquette, 9 out of 10 men wouldn't be able to tolerate such things. They might even take their anger out on women because of this. They wouldn't trust their daughters and would do something that was very despicable. After that, it would be too late to regret it. They would look like they were in so much pain that they wished they were dead. Just like Luqing Emperor, it was actually very disgusting." Li Hongyuan held her hand. Jingwan stepped on the stone and walked in front of him, snuggling into his arms. Li Hongyuan deliberately controlled himself and didn't let Jingwan notice the look in his eyes. Although he couldn't see it himself, he knew very well that the look in his eyes at this moment was very scary. After staying in silence for a while, Jingwan's attention shifted slightly from him. "The scenery here is not bad." Li Hongyuan glanced at it. "Yes." He responded indifferently. No matter how beautiful the scenery was, it couldn't hide his dark heart. It wasn't early to begin with. At this time, the sky had formed a beautiful fiery cloud. It was reflected in the back lake. It looked particularly beautiful. Looking at this scenery, Jingwan forgot her worries for a moment. She was so quiet, and occasionally said a few words. Time passed quietly and the sky was getting darker and darker. "Ah Yuan, let's go back. Let's go back." Seeing that the two of them were moving, the people around them slowly gathered. The two of them walked at the front hand in hand. The others kept a distance of more than 10 feet behind them. When they returned to the water stronghold, the lights were already lit. Seeing them return, everyone was very happy. In the evening, Li Hongyuan saw the generals of this trip and said a few words of encouragement. Because they had already heard of Li Hongyuan's actions as the king of hell, this time they were in fear and trepidation, overwhelmed by the favor. Li Hongyuan didn't comment. He wasn't someone who would consider other people's feelings. "Have you already informed your superiors?" "Yes, by tomorrow morning at the latest they will come to pick you up and leave. It's been a few days. Have you found out who attacked this prince?" There was some sweat on the general's forehead. Replying to Wang Ye, "This general is responsible for Governor Sun." Speaking to this point, he suddenly remembered that Sun Gongzi was still thinking about Jin Qinhuang Fei, causing Jin Qinhuang to become jealous. Now that he mentioned it, did he want to die or did he want to die? But he couldn't say half of what he wanted to say, so he had to bite the bullet and continue. "To find the whereabouts of your highness." As for the other matters, this general doesn't know for the time being. Please forgive me, Your Highness. In reality, it wasn't that they didn't know, but that there was no progress. The colleagues who were in charge of this matter, as well as the various officials, were so worried that their hair had turned white. Fortunately, Jin Qinhuang's good fortune was profound and he was not injured. Otherwise, they really wouldn't be able to bear the emperor's anger. You may leave. Yes. That's it? The general who retreated let out a sigh of relief. A gust of wind blew and he felt a chill on his back. It turned out that he was already drenched in sweat. At this time, Jingwan had already fallen asleep. Li Hongyuan looked at the light and was slightly lost in thought. Patriarch Pei requested an audience. Perhaps it was because he had nothing to do, but Li Hongyuan wanted to see him. Patriarch Pei gave a courtesy greeting. It's all because Jin Qinhuang is dissolute and beautiful, but he was originally an infatuated type. This is really unexpected, to the point that he had wronged himself. Everyone says that love is long, but the hero's breath is short. When it comes to Jin Qinhuang, it's hard to avoid disappointment. Disappointed in Ben Wang. The remnant of the previous dynasty must have satisfied Patriarch Pei. Patriarch Pei was startled. This old man doesn't know what Your Highness is talking about. Although he tried his best to conceal it, but the shock wasn't light. Patriarch Pei clenched his fists in his sleeves. Your Highness is in a bad mood. So this old man will take his leave first. https://11/11807/6653568. Mobile reading website, M. Chapter 299. Even if Qiyuan was destroyed, the throne would not be occupied by the remnants of the previous dynasty, and even more so, it would not be your Pei family's turn to be that regent. Aristocratic families that have been around for generations, aristocratic families without the support of power can only fool ordinary people. There is probably no one who is clearer than you, the patriarch of the Pei family, about how many people are eyeing the Pei family. If you want to act big in front of this prince, you should first weigh your own capabilities. Don't come to me if you have nothing to say. Think carefully before you come. If you don't, there is no need for the Pei family to exist. Hearing Li Hongyuan's voice behind him, clan leader Pei paused for a moment before he sped up. After he left the room, clan leader Pei no longer hid his feelings. His expression was uncertain. Even though Li Hongyuan's attitude was distant and cold, he was confident that he could achieve his goal in the end. Now that Li Hongyuan impatiently pointed it out, the advantage that he thought he had disappeared in an instant. Instead, he was being controlled tightly. Regardless of which dynasty it was, they hated the surviving members of the previous dynasty. Naturally, they would want to eliminate them completely, regardless of whether they were old, weak women or children. If the imperial court found out that the Pei family was hiding the descendants of the previous dynasty, they would definitely destroy the Pei family. Moreover, no other family would help them. No one would dare to interfere in the matter of exterminating the Pei family. Don't forget that the protection given by Emperor Taizu had a major prerequisite. In essence, the Pei clan was not favored by the Li royal clan. Let me ask you, it's already a change of dynasty. It's fine if you don't curry favor with me, the new emperor, but you still can't forget the previous dynasty. What is the meaning of this? Because the dynasty was not stable and there were too many killings in the early stages. If they attacked the Pei family at this time, the newly established dynasty would immediately be in chaos. In order to show mercy, they let the Pei family go. The clan leader of the Pei family at that time made such a decision because he knew the situation at that time. However, the clan leader of the Pei family at that time was loyal and righteous. Did he think about the other members of the Pei family? Moreover, how did he suppress the voices of the Pei family at that time? Could it be that all the Pei family members were of the same mind as him? As long as Emperor Taizu of the Qiyuan promised a high position and generous salary, there would be people who would not hesitate even if they were expelled from the family. Then what exactly happened back then? This was also a mystery to Patriarch Pei. Li Hongyuan was right. Many people were eyeing the Pei family now, especially those in-laws. They put on a good face, but they wanted to peel off a layer of the Pei family's skin. The simplest and most helpless thing was that the Pei family's dowry and betrothal gifts were far more than what they received. From any aspect, they couldn't give too little. If they were too little, it was one thing to be criticized, but the Pei family couldn't afford to lose face. It was still fine if they were from the side branches, but the closer they were to the main family, the more they couldn't save. Not only that, in the past the Pei family usually only had connections with other clans through marriage. Ordinary nobles rarely had connections with them. Even if these nobles wanted to marry the Pei family's concubine's daughter, they had to give everything they had. It wasn't like now where any Tom, Dick or Harry dared to come knocking on their door. Of course, this was only Patriarch Pei's opinion. It wasn't that serious in nature. However, even if it was a Tom, Dick or Harry, they weren't born with nothing. To put it bluntly, the Pei family from top to bottom were born with nothing. They were just ordinary people. No matter how many famous scholars there were, it couldn't change this fact. Just based on this point, they had no right to look down on others. However, it was a pity that clan leader Pei would never realize this. He was more concerned about Li Hongyuan now. How did he know about the descendants of the previous dynasty's imperial family? This could be considered the Pei family's biggest secret. Even in the Pei family there were very few people who knew about it. They were all trustworthy people. Then where did they go wrong? This kind of family extermination matter, those who knew about it knew the severity of it. The possibility of it being accidentally found out was very small. In comparison, he was more inclined to believe that someone had leaked the secret, and that someone had done it in a very conscious state. Thinking about this, Patriarch Pei's face became colder. If he knew, however, this wasn't the main point now. The main point was how to deal with his grandson. According to the current situation, only he knew about this matter. If his father knew about it, he would have already made a move on the Pei family. He hid it, which meant that he had a motive. What he wanted was obvious at a glance. Now he had to make a decision. He could only choose one of the two paths. In reality, after being exposed, there was no other choice. If he chose the descendants of the previous dynasty's imperial family, the Pei family would only have a dead end. His grandson became the only choice for the Pei family to rise again. In the face of life and death, in the face of future interests, Patriarch Pei's mind couldn't be clearer. However, at the same time, the Pei family had lost all initiative. If they had only wanted to help at 30% of their strength, he might have squeezed them into 120%. Patriarch Pei hated this feeling of being completely out of control and at the mercy of others. As for the person who had caused the Pei family to fall into this state, the only thing that comforted Patriarch Pei was that this grandson of his was very resourceful. The stronger he was, the greater the advantage he had in the fight for the throne. In the end, there would be fewer variables. However, although this kind of person would reduce the chances of those assisting him to perform, it would also reduce the danger that they faced. Patriarch Pei was very ambitious. Otherwise, he wouldn't have raised the descendants of the previous dynasty's imperial family. In the end, it would be very difficult to satisfy him. Moreover, he had a fatal weakness. He was also worried that Li Hongyuan would burn the bridge after crossing the river. Patriarch Pei was also very clear about this kind of thing. It would be a joke to have deep feelings for someone he had never met or interacted with. It was said that the kindness of birth was not as good as the kindness of raising. From what he knew, imperial concubine Su had done her best for this adopted son. He didn't need to miss his birth mother. As for these people who suddenly intervened, other than the thin blood relationship, they didn't have any feelings to speak of. It would be a joke if they really succeeded. No matter how he looked at it, the disadvantages outweighed the advantages. So what? Patriarch Pei stood in the cold wind and resolutely turned back. For this kind of thing, the sooner he expressed his opinion, the better. This time even his attitude was much better. Li Hongyuan didn't reject him and his sitting posture didn't change much. Your Highness, if there's a chance, how about I let you meet someone? Patriarch Pei smiled warmly. Li Hongyuan also guessed who he wanted to meet. This more or less meant that he was going to hand this person over to him. You raised him like your own son. You married and had children for him to continue the bloodline. Now you're abandoning him just like that. You really are a qualified patriarch. Patriarch Pei's back was drenched in cold sweat. He didn't expect Li Hongyuan to know the other party's identity. One had to know that there were even fewer people who knew this and they were all surnamed Pei. Could it be that he didn't mention it before because he wanted to test him again? Why was it that the more he interacted with this grandson, the more he felt that this grandson was unfathomable? Patriarch Pei rejoiced that he made a decisive choice. Patriarch Pei lowered his head and pursed his lips. Your Highness also said that this old man is a qualified patriarch. Yes, an unqualified father. This prince's wife hates this kind of person the most. Patriarch Pei's expression was exceptionally good. He wasn't sure if Li Hongyuan was speaking the truth, or if he was insinuating something with his words. As a woman, Your Highness is inevitably soft-hearted. However, as the patriarch of a clan, you bear the expectations of all the clan members. Usually it's best if everything is perfect, but when there's a conflict you have to make a choice. Li Hongyuan nodded as if he agreed with Patriarch Pei's words. It's obvious what the choice is between the entire clan and an outsider who's like a puppet. It's just as Your Highness said. In essence, it's a matter of choosing the greater of two benefits. For the first time, Patriarch Pei felt that talking to someone was so tiring. In the end, he really couldn't figure out Li Hongyuan's true intentions. Your Highness's words seem inappropriate. This old man thinks that it's more appropriate to choose the lesser of two evils. This prince was talking about the time when Patriarch Pei wasn't the patriarch. Patriarch Pei didn't know how many times he had changed his expression tonight. He felt that he probably didn't look at the almanac when he came to see his grandson today. Perhaps it was written that everything was inappropriate. He had been the patriarch for nearly 20 years. Before that, the only thing his grandson had mentioned was about his mother. The problem was, that was 28 years ago. There weren't many people who knew the details. Could it be that his source of information was actually the same as the news about the descendants of the previous dynasty's imperial family? It was very likely. Who was this person? Who was it? However, since he knew about what happened 28 years ago, the scope of his search was much smaller. Patriarch Pei smiled bitterly. But I don't know what Your Highness has heard. Who's the one who started this rumor? What happened 28 years ago wasn't like what happened with the descendants of the previous dynasty. There was no conclusive evidence. If he insisted, who could say anything? The one on the throne said it. Does Patriarch Pei want to confront him face to face? Li Hongyuan said casually. Patriarch Pei even felt that it was amusing. It was as if he knew what Patriarch Pei was up to and was just teasing Patriarch Pei, but Patriarch Pei couldn't do anything about it. Patriarch Pei showed endless grief and indignation, but he seemed to be holding back because of the other party's identity. His Majesty's words are golden. Naturally, whatever he says is the truth. Li Hongyuan laughed lightly. His voice was clearly very pleasant to the ears, but to Patriarch Pei, it was filled with mockery. It was as if he was saying, "Who are you trying to show off to when everyone already knows this?" In Li Hongyuan's eyes, Patriarch Pei was just a clown. If he said it out loud, he could still argue for it. At least he could maintain it on the surface. This kind of feeling was like a fishbone stuck in one's throat. There was no room for argument. If he said it out loud, he would only receive a deeper level of humiliation. For example, "So you're this kind of person. You're really self-aware." His face was swept away and his dignity was completely gone. It wasn't humiliation, it was humiliation. This was probably the most realistic portrayal of Patriarch Pei right now. How did he end up in this situation? In the end, Li Hongyuan knew a lot about him, but he knew nothing about the real Li Hongyuan. It's already late at night. Lao Fu will not disturb Wang Ye's rest and will take his leave first. Patriarch Pei probably never expected that he would one day have to flee in defeat. Patriarch Pei shouldn't have turned back. Was it that his awareness wasn't deep enough? Or that he didn't want to disturb the noble Jin Qinhuang's rest? Patriarch Pei didn't want to think so much anymore. He hurriedly left. Being led by the nose, Patriarch Pei was naturally very unreconciled. However, he was a person who always put profit first. Would he bear a grudge against Li Hongyuan because of this and consider finding another way out? No, he wouldn't. Not to mention the energy needed to make a new plan. The most secretive things could be known by this grandson. If he made a move, could he hide it from this grandson's eyes? This kind of thing couldn't be gambled because he couldn't afford to lose. That night, Patriarch Pei was destined to have a sleepless night. Li Hongyuan didn't return to his room until Jingwan came to find him. Li Hongyuan hurriedly got up and pulled her into his arms. He slightly reprimanded her. "Although it's already summer, we live near the water. The night is colder than other places and the humidity is heavy. What if the evil energy enters your body? You're already an adult, why don't you know how to take care of your own body?" Jingwan hugged his waist and shook it coquettishly. "I can't sleep without you." He knew that she always slept regularly, and his heart couldn't help but soften when she was still awake. You could have sent someone to call me. You didn't have to come personally. Jingwan looked up at him and blinked. I thought you were still angry. It was rare to see her like this. Li Hongyuan couldn't help but laugh. If I'm really angry, I won't bother with you. Jingwan's lips moved and then she stammered. I'm a little different from usual. Li Hongyuan instantly understood what she meant. Wan, if you miss me you can tell me. Out of 10 times he would use this as a pretext to make a fuss. That was called fun. When he was really angry he wouldn't torture her. He was worried that he wouldn't be able to control himself and hurt her. However, his little sweetheart would misunderstand. In her eyes, was he someone who had to solve problems in bed? She was obviously an extremely intelligent woman, but why was she so pure in certain areas? He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he couldn't do anything to her. Jingwan also realized that she had probably made a stupid mistake. Her face was completely red and she wished she could find a hole to hide in. It was so embarrassing. Jingwan wanted to push him away, but how could she? It was rare for his wife to make a stupid mistake and she invited him sincerely. Now that he was calm enough, how could Li Hongyuan let go of the delicious food that was right in front of his mouth? He lifted Jingwan up. Caught off guard, Jingwan hurriedly hooked her arms around his neck and angrily punched his shoulders twice. To Li Hongyuan this was no different from scratching an itch. After the two of them fell asleep, they didn't know how much time had passed. The next morning Li Hongyuan woke up, but Jingwan was still sleeping soundly. The room wasn't big and he was a martial artist, so his hearing was excellent. He could clearly hear what was going on outside. It seemed that many people had arrived. They were buzzing around like flies. It was so annoying. Servants. Jingwan's wet nurse hurried in. Your Highness, are you going to get up? Tell those people outside to scram as far away as possible. https://11/118076653569. HTML. After making a report, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Mobile edition. Chapter 300. Tell those people outside to scram as far away as possible. No one was surprised by Li Hongyuan's order. Jingwan's wet nurse responded softly and went out to pass on the message. Not long after, the sound disappeared and even the other noises disappeared without a trace. This clearance was quite thorough. Li Hongyuan closed his eyes. No one knew if he was taking a nap or preparing to go back to sleep. Jingwan woke up naturally not much later than usual. She didn't have the habit of lazing in bed, so she got up, washed up and moved her arms and legs appropriately. When she turned around, a certain someone was still supporting his head with one hand, with a silk blanket draped around his waist, and looking at Jingwan with half-opened eyes. That posture was quite seductive. Speaking of which, there were so many things, but most of the things in their room were not taken away, especially the things on the bed. The bedroom was a place that those officials didn't dare to set foot in. It didn't matter how luxurious and extravagant it was. If they didn't even have this kind of treatment, Li Hongyuan would probably not hesitate to slaughter them. It would be abnormal if she didn't shorten her lifespan by a few years after facing such a man for a long time. Jingwan pinched her nose. If she wasn't obsessed with looks, she would be subconsciously obsessed with them. If she wasn't a pervert, she would feel sorry for herself if she didn't pounce on such a husband. In any case, Jingwan also felt that she was becoming more and more shameless. Thus, she pounced on Li Hongyuan without hesitation, leaving 2 teeth marks on his chest, and kissed him to her heart's content. Then she looked up at him with a smile like a flower, and licked her lips with her tongue as if she hadn't had enough. Li Hongyuan didn't move, nor did he respond. He just let Jingwan do what she wanted. When he saw Jingwan's appearance, he revealed a faint smile. He reached out and gently held the back of Jingwan's head, his fingertips rubbing the edge of her hair. Wan, you're so enthusiastic this morning. Did your husband not serve you well last night? Do you want to make up for it now? Jingwan's ears turned red, but she didn't back down. She drew circles on his shoulder with her finger. That's very thoughtful. But can't you let me savor it? Of course, how can it not be? I also want to savor it. It was not Li Hongyuan's style to let his wife take advantage of him. After a while, Li Hongyuan slowly got up and let Jingwan help him change his clothes clumsily. If he met an impatient person, he would probably be driven crazy by Jingwan. Fortunately, Li Hongyuan was very patient and had no intention of helping. Even so, the final result was not satisfactory. Jingwan felt a little ashamed that she was almost raised into a 9th-grade handicap. She was probably the most unqualified wife. However, when she thought that her husband didn't care at all, she nimbly tidied up herself. The small flaws left by Jingwan were fixed. Even if he was dressed in rough clothes, he still looked dignified and handsome. Jingwan felt justified again. She couldn't help it. He had a good life. Li Hongyuan didn't know Jingwan's thoughts. If he knew, he would probably be more distressed. She didn't know how bad her life was. No matter how good her life was now, it was not enough to make up for it to a certain extent. However, Li Hongyuan was actually very glad that she didn't know and didn't remember. Probably no one wanted to go through that kind of life. After a crazy time, Jingwan also needed to freshen up. Then the two of them had a simple meal. When everything was done, Jingwan followed Li Hongyuan out of the room. Caught off guard, Jingwan was really shocked. The structure of the water stronghold was not the same as ordinary buildings. There were no small courtyards or things like that. However, there was a platform in front of every house. There were all kinds of wooden bridges connecting them, and there were also wooden ladders going up and down. The only spacious platform was the same as the threshing ground in the countryside. It was mostly used to dry crops and things like that. Places higher than that were basically visible at a glance. Now there was a group of people drying there, and all of them were wearing official robes. Even if they were of the lowest rank, it was enough to make anyone in the water stronghold revere them. At this time, most people probably clearly understood that Li Hongyuan was not ordinary. It had to be known that when they first saw him, they could still curiously look at him from afar. Now almost every house was closed. In reality, this kind of mentality was very easy to understand. First, most people didn't know Li Hongyuan's identity. Second, information was blocked. Many people didn't know what a prince meant. Often, it wasn't as authoritative as the county magistrate that they could see or hear from up close. Now, any one of these people could make a person like the county magistrate be respectful. Now they were all standing there like grandchildren with their heads down and hands down, not saying a word. How could they not be afraid of such a person? When did these officials arrive? Jingwan asked the servant girl in a quiet voice. Wang Fei, there were officials arriving one after another in the middle of the night. The latest was more than 2 hours ago. They've been there since they arrived? In the middle of the night, they've been standing there in the cold wind? It must have been hard on these officials. Yes, the people of the water stronghold didn't dare to approach the officials. The officials also didn't say that they wanted to borrow a place to rest. Later, the people of the water stronghold sent them some hot soup. Then 2 hours ago, the officials came here and were driven away by Wang Ye. Qingzhu explained clearly. Jingwan realized that when they came over, she reckoned that she was sleeping soundly. Very good, Jin Qinwang once again overbearingly helped her take the blame. Jingwan didn't follow them. It wasn't very appropriate and it wasn't necessary. After Li Hongyuan left, Jingwan had people move a small stool and sat on the edge of the small platform outside. Looking down, she could see most of the water stronghold and the sparkling water surface. This place had good mountains and water. It was good to live in for a short period of time, but the humidity was too heavy. It probably wouldn't be good to live in for a long time. However, Jingwan saw that the people of the water stronghold were very healthy. Perhaps there was a unique method to get rid of the humidity. Qingzhu, how is Darren's situation? Son Darren is already fine. He woke up last night. The people of the water stronghold are very good at dispelling snake venom. The snake venom has basically been completely removed. Rest more and after a few days he will be fine. It's just that, at first it was not discovered. Son Darren's right ankle was also injured. It is said that when it was discovered, it was already swollen like a steamed bun. That injury will probably require a longer period of recuperation. Qingzhu explained in detail. Jingwan was silent for a moment. It's good that he's fine. Let the wet nurse go see him. Just say that the past is over and that he should take care of himself. Jingwan thought that her attitude was very straightforward and decisive. She didn't leave the impression that she was clingy. Sun Yilan's deep affection for her made her a little puzzled. Although Li Hongyuan's deep affection for her also made her puzzled. Well, in her view of love, there was no such thing as love at first sight, but it didn't mean that others didn't. Moreover, Sun Yilan's feelings for her couldn't be considered as love at first sight. In the end, there was more or less a factor in it. Because of the restrictions on women, they didn't go out of the house and had little contact with other men. Men naturally had little opportunities to come into contact with other women. This woman was easily moved by a man who existed most of the time, and relatively speaking, this man should be the same. Common interests were the cornerstone of a relationship. When Sun Yilin first fell in love with her, was there not a factor of flowers and trees in it? No one believed it. Yes. Qingzhu answered and turned to leave. When the wet nurse went to say it, of course, it wouldn't be as simple as just passing on Jingwan's words. Some things were better explained to him clearly. Perhaps it was a bit cruel for Sun Yilin, but as the saying goes, it's better to have a short pain than a long pain. Only when he completely let it go would it be the best result for everyone. As Jingwan expected, her wet nurse went to see Sun Yilin and also sent some food. Because he hadn't eaten well for several days, the food sent was some light and liquid food. The wet nurse attentively served him the food. Then, according to his intention, she helped him up to sit by the window and opened the window to let in some fresh air. However, from his position he could see the big platform, but he couldn't see Jingwan's location. Although he couldn't hear the specific situation, but from the official's stiff posture he could roughly guess what was going on. For the officials in the capital, the higher the rank, the more times they would experience Jin Qingwang's fierceness. These people were no exception. Sun Yilin took 2 glances and then withdrew his line of sight. Then he asked about the matter this time. The general content had already been strung together. As for the details, he only said that the situation at that time was too frightening. He was scared witless and just ran for his life. How could he pay attention to those things? For the women of the inner residence, this was the best excuse. Then at the right time they would show their lingering fear. Basically, there would be no one who wouldn't believe it and wouldn't pursue it. There would be a bit of pity in their hearts, and they didn't want to evoke the fear in the other's heart. Sun Yilin's purpose the wet nurse naturally knew. She also followed his intention and talked about Jingwan. Then she vaguely expressed that Wang Yi was a vinegar jar. Towards Wang Fei's previous 2 fiancés he was very wary and possessive. Even if it was the brothers and elders of her maternal family, or even anyone else, as long as they paid more attention, Wang Fei might be tormented later on. In order to dispel Sun Yilin's thoughts, the wet nurse said these words in a more serious manner. Even if the meaning wasn't stated clearly, it couldn't be more obvious. Sun Gongzi, if you sincerely want the good of our families, Wang Fei, it's best that you don't appear again and don't pay any attention. However, the wet nurse blindly spoke and didn't notice Sun Yilin's increasingly dark and unclear expression. The wet nurse's purpose may have been achieved, but at the same time, it also caused some misunderstandings in Sun Yilin. Although he knew that Li Hongyuan wasn't as unbearable as he appeared to be, but his temperament was malicious, ruthless, and temperamental. Who could guarantee that these weren't true? Moreover, there were indeed women who died in his hands. Torment. Sun Yilin unreservedly thought of this. When he looked at Li Hongyuan again, Sun Yilin's eyes carried an endless chill. That was clearly the woman he admired, the person he wanted to hold in the palm of his hand like a pearl or a treasure. He couldn't get her, but Li Hongyuan easily got her. After getting her, he didn't cherish her. His heart was narrow and he wantonly trampled on women. What kind of man was he? He had once thought that a woman like Miss Luo, even Jin Qingwang, would cherish her well. Sure enough, he was too naive. For a man like him who was scheming and shrewd, his heart probably only wanted the power of the country. What did a woman count for? However, he was powerless to do anything now. If there was any movement, it would most likely cause immeasurable consequences anyone. Sun Yilin lowered his eyelids, covering the endless haze in his eyes. Mama, don't worry. In the future I won't cause any trouble for Luo. Jin Qingwang Fei. I won't. This was the only thing he could do now. As for the rest. Sun Yilin's fingernails were almost about to sink into the flesh of his palms. The wet nurse breathed a sigh of relief and patted her chest, unconsciously revealing a smile. This naturally couldn't be better. Then Gongzi, have a good rest. Soon we should be leaving this place. Alright, I'll have to trouble Mama. The wet nurse left the room and closed the door behind her. Sun Yilin sat in the same place, his head bowed for a long time, quiet and without a sound. Until a certain time when he raised his head again, no one would be able to see any abnormality on his face. Jingwan probably didn't think that her wet nurse's words barely achieved her goal, but the opposite effect was even worse. So much so that when some things happened in the future she couldn't find the reason. How Jin Qinhuang treated her, as long as one had eyes, they would be able to see it. Why was he the only one who held a different view and firmly believed that hearsay is false, and that what he heard from other people's mouths were all false? In fact, he had long known of this consequence. It wasn't just a preconceived notion. At this moment, Sun Yilin firmly believed that Li Hongyuan didn't treat Jingwan well. All the good that he showed was just an act. The purpose was to confuse everyone and make them think that he was a sentimental person so that people would lower their vigilance towards him so that he could act in secret. He couldn't see Jingwan and didn't know her true state. At first, at this very moment, his perception had never changed. The wet nurse went back to report to Jingwan and solemnly vowed that she had already spoken to Sun Gongzi. Jingwan chuckled. Oh? Then what did the wet nurse say? The wet nurse was about to repeat, but Li Hongyuan came back. Naturally, she immediately chose to keep her mouth shut. With such an interruption, Jingwan also forgot to ask again. Otherwise, she should have been able to perceive something. It was just that she missed it, which led to some immeasurable consequences. Li Hongyuan faintly swept a glance at the wet nurse, as if he knew what she was talking about. The wet nurse kept quiet out of fear, lowered her head and stiffened her body. Jingwan got up and walked in front of Li Hongyuan. You can withdraw, I want to talk to Wang Ye. Even if a certain person never got angry with the people around her, it seemed that other than Gong Mama, everyone else was very afraid of him. When they could not get close, they would try their best not to get close. This made him feel rather helpless. Yes. The wet nurse and Qing Zhu quickly left. Jingwan's purpose was clear at a glance, and Li Hongyuan was too lazy to expose it. Ah Yuan, when are we leaving? We're already preparing. Jingwan nodded and then seemed to have thought of something. So many adults, what do they think when they see you dressed like this? What do they think? Does death count as an atonement? https://11/11807/6653571. Chapter 301. What thoughts? Does death count as an apology? Li Hongyuan said thoughtfully. Jingwan snorted. If it was an official from Shannon County, it would be fine. After all, they had never seen Jin Qinhuang's extravagance and fastidiousness. However, the officials of Kai Mingfu were different. They had personally experienced that scene. Now that this honorable lord was dressed so shabbily, it was a feeling that they could not bear to look straight at. They would not go so far as to apologize with death, but their hearts would definitely be perturbed. After all, they still cherished their lives very much. Let's not talk about them. I have already ordered them to send people into the mountains to look for people. According to the original plan, Gong Mama's group will be the first to return. The rest will slowly converge after leaving here. I reckon that when Gong Mama's group returns, the preparations here will be almost complete. After that, when we arrive at Chongzhou, we will probably start to be busy for a while. Not only will I be busy, you will also be very busy. It can't be said that you are busier than me. It's still the same words. If someone gives it to you, just accept it. If you like it, keep it. If you don't like it, take it back and give it to Fu Huang to enrich the national treasury. Presumably he will be quite happy. In the end, Li Hongyuan said sarcastically. It would be good if he was really happy. I'm afraid that the more we give, the less happy he will be. The more they gave, the more these officials would be greedy. If the gifts that were casually given were so extravagant, then the gifts that were not taken out would definitely be even more expensive. In this way, should we collect more or less for him? If we collect more, he will be unhappy and that will be unfilial. If we collect less, we will connive at those vermin and endanger the river and that will be disloyal. It is truly difficult to balance loyalty and filial piety. Li Hongyuan had a rather awkward expression. Fu Huang is first a monarch and then a father. When it is difficult to balance loyalty and filial piety, naturally we will choose loyalty and abandon filial piety. Besides, helping him to stabilize the country, is that not the best filial piety? Jingwan comforted. Wang Fei's words are reasonable. Then we will have to trouble Wang Fei. Wang Fei will work hard and help Fu Huang collect more. Li Hongyuan's face was stern. Jingwan couldn't hold back her laughter. Wasn't it a little inappropriate to be so serious about tricking Emperor Lu Qingdi? However, he had brought this upon himself. Jiangnan's officialdom had been messed up by many officials and his sons. He could hardly absolve himself from the blame. In the end, it was the result of poor supervision. If Li Hongyuan had not helped him expose it, he did not know how far this cancer would have spread. Perhaps the entire Jiangnan would have been completely divided up. As a result, the next emperor would not only not receive the taxes from Jiangnan, but would also have to spend money to fill the hole and restore normal operations. Of course, from Jingwan's point of view, this was Li Hongyuan clearing away obstacles for his future. Then Granny Gong and the others returned. Your nanny is quite dedicated to you. You can't wait any longer. Li Hongyuan said indifferently. What's wrong? Is a Yuan jealous again? Jingwan raised her eyebrows and smiled. Probably. This was the first time such an uncertain answer had been given. In fact, Li Hongyuan was a little embarrassed. How should he put it? Since he was born, Granny Gong had been secretly watching him. Of course, he did not know for a long time in his previous life. When he came back when he was 10 years old, he found out about her existence. After that, he had been deliberately training her. She had been with him for a long time. In the end, after serving Wan Wan, she completely sided with Wan Wan. He even disliked him. Well, this was what Li Hongyuan expected. So, even if he was a little jealous, there was nothing to say. In fact, when she was a female bodyguard, she had a problem with him. It was just that she did not say it out loud because he was the master. The reason was that she was influenced by her first master. Even in an isolated environment, she still hoped that the imperial noble consort's child could be as gentle and kind as the imperial noble consort. However, she also knew that it was impossible. In a place like the imperial noble consort, it might be possible to be gentle and kind if one wanted to live well, but one's feelings should never be dominant. The imperial noble consort was actually the best example. Wan Wan was more in line with her wishes. It was only because Wan Wan's temperament was somewhat similar to the imperial noble consort that she mentioned. Granny Gong's existence was more or less special to him. His tolerance was slightly higher than that of other people except for Wan Wan. However, Granny Gong had always been a person of self-restraint and etiquette. She never overstepped her boundaries and served her master wholeheartedly. Therefore, if she had a problem with him in some aspects, he would ignore it. Even if you want to put on a show, you have to complete it. I'll go and have a look. Jingwan chuckled. When Jingwan saw Granny Gong, she was really stunned. Originally, it was just a matter of putting on a show. As long as they avoided the soldiers who might enter the mountain, they did not need to go too deep. How could they be so embarrassed after leaving for less than 20 hours? It really seemed that they had spent a few days in the mountain and some people were really injured. Jingwan hurried forward and grabbed Granny Gong. Granny, what happened? Don't worry, princess. They just encountered a pack of wolves. Jingwan's heart suddenly jumped to her throat. Her husband's bodyguards could be trusted by him, so they were not ordinary people. It seemed that none of them were intact. It could be seen that the number of wolves was quite considerable. However, Granny Gong, as a woman of the inner residence, you said just a pack of wolves so casually. Is it really okay? Jingwan was so worried in her heart that she did not notice this problem. Granny, how are you? Are you hurt? Don't worry, princess. I was just bitten. The wound is not deep. It's nothing serious. Granny Gong comforted Jingwan. On the contrary, the bodyguards behind Granny Gong lowered their heads and felt a little ashamed. Although the shock in their hearts gradually subsided, they would never forget that scene for the rest of their lives. Almost 20 wolves, 1/3 of them were killed by this granny who looked so serious. She was such an ordinary woman in daily life, but when she killed, she was so decisive and extremely cruel. At that moment, she was like a figure who walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. If they did not see it with their own eyes, they would not believe that the person in front of them was the same person. It was more like they were twins with completely different temperaments. Unfortunately, at this moment there was no need to put on a show. Anyway, the officials did not dare to come close and could not hear what they said. Jingwan asked people to treat their wounds quickly. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan, who was worried and busy. His expression was indifferent, as if it had nothing to do with him. When the bodyguard's wounds were almost treated with the help of others, Li Hongyuan appeared. They hurriedly got up. Greetings, master. Li Hongyuan casually waved his hand. What's the situation? Master, it should be purely an accident. After the wolves were killed, we carefully checked the surrounding situation. There was nothing unusual. However, Li Hongyuan was not satisfied with this answer. Send a message to the people outside. Investigate again. He knew very well that there was at least a group of people hidden in the dark. They had nothing to do with the real water bandits. It was only because of clan leader Pei's strange movements that the other party's plan was interrupted. The problem was that there was no trace of these people. The people who stayed in Kaming Mansion to keep an eye on the officials did not send any valuable information. Therefore he could not let his guard down. Yes. Looking at it now, the people who stayed by Li Hongyuan's side were either weak or injured. Moreover, the people who served him were far from enough. It should be considered a good opportunity to operate. However, this matter was not urgent. No matter what, they had to reach Chongzhou Mansion first. Even if there was a girl who could be considered acceptable in this place, she was not one of their own. Everything was ready to go. Because the canal was still blocked, even if there were many official boats, there was no need to clear the area in advance. The journey was smooth and unimpeded. Because the wind had been following them, they arrived at Chongzhou Prefecture very quickly. The ferry in Chongzhou Prefecture was naturally not as good as in Kaming Prefecture. However, now was not the time to look at this. They roughly understood the situation of Li Hongyuan and the others, so they had prepared everything they needed. Not only that, it should be said that the women of the inner residence knew the ways of the inner residence better. The maids they had prepared were also the best. Perhaps they did not have any spare maids, but when they saw that there were only 2 or 3 maids, these madams looked at each other and smiled tacitly. They all secretly praised themselves for making a wise decision. The imperial family of Qiyuan did not have the hobby of building palaces everywhere. Therefore the place where they stayed was the best side courtyard in Chongzhou Prefecture. For the time being they did not know who it belonged to. Li Hongyuan did not say a word from beginning to end. When he entered the side courtyard he just went straight inside. Although he did not say anything, there was always an air of enough. The group of Darren naturally stayed in the front courtyard, but those madams entered the second gate. The guards and retainers that could be seen everywhere had now all become a row of beautiful maids. Jin Qinhuang's figure had already disappeared. It was a little regretful that they did not see his reaction. "Madams, it has been hard on you to carefully select these people," Jingwan said with a faint smile, but anyone could see that there was no smile in her eyes. All the madams' hearts thumped, thinking that this was bad. They only cared about Jin Qinhuang and forgot about Jin Qinhuang Fei. As long as it was a woman, they would not like someone to put beautiful women in front of their husband. Now that so many of them were placed in her eyes, it was especially eye-catching. Although everything depended on Jin Qinhuang Fei also could not be neglected. This pillow talk was sometimes more powerful than anything else. One of the madam's mind turned quickly. To be able to serve Wang Yi and Wang Fei, that is the honor of this subject's wife and others. How could it be hard? However, these people were selected by this subject's wife from various families. They are certainly not as good as Wang Fei Nyongyong's personal people. When Wang Fei Nyongyong's people arrive, these obstructing people, whether Wang Fei Nyongyong wants to keep them or send them away, it will all be up to you. For now we will have to inconvenience Wang Yi and you. Jingwan nodded her head indifferently, tacitly agreeing with their actions. The Furans secretly looked again. That to let these people leave it would take at least 2 or 3 days. Who knew if there would be any unforeseen events during this period of time? If Jin Qinhuang slept with the people himself, could he blame it on their heads? They were all secretly competing to see who would be the first to rise. That being the case, I won't. Wang Fei, it's not good. Mu Gonggong hurriedly trotted over, his face deathly pale. Wang Yi took the 2 servant girls who came in to bathe. She got the hang of it so quickly? Which family did this belong to? The madams looked at each other with hidden expectations. But Jingwan's face suddenly became not so good. Speak clearly. Wang Yi has strangled them to death. Mu Gonggong said, trembling a little. But whether it was real trembling or fake trembling only he himself knew. Obviously the madams were happy too early. https://11/11807/6653574. Chapter 302. Jingwan covered her eyes with her hands, hiding all her emotions. After a moment she put down her hands and said coldly, "Madams, you can go back first. Since this person came to this courtyard, it has nothing to do with your families." Obviously this was to help them absolve themselves of the blame. One had to know that in this kind of situation, not to mention finding trouble with the murderer, only the murderer would vent his anger on others. If he really wanted to get to the bottom of this, then it was obvious that the family that the two maidservants originally belonged to would have to bear the responsibility. Jingwan said that the people in this courtyard had nothing to do with them. Naturally, she drew a clear line between them and the people in this courtyard. The joy and expectation on the madam's faces froze on their faces. Because of the shock that appeared in an instant, their faces were distorted. Obviously, their bodies had given such a direct reaction, but their minds were still in a daze. Only when Jingwan spoke did they respond with an "oh." In fact, they probably didn't know what they said. Jingwan didn't bother to pay attention to them anymore. She had already done her utmost benevolence. "Mu'in, see the guests out." She flicked her sleeves and left. This place was far from being familiar with. Jingwan casually asked a person to lead the way. The little maid was very excited about the task that fell on her. When she walked to Jingwan, she was even somewhat at a loss. However, she soon muttered in her heart, "How could a dignified princess wear such coarse clothes that people like us disdained?" Although she thought about it, she didn't dare to show the slightest abnormality. Perhaps in order to express herself as much as possible, the little maid tried to use innocent words to introduce the courtyard. Obviously, she didn't know what happened in the backyard. If it was in a normal situation, Jingwan might be in the mood to listen. But now she only felt bored and unconsciously frowned. Qingzhu grabbed the little maid. "Okay, let's stop here. Take this broken silver to buy sweets first. Later the princess will reward you heavily." Although the little maid was somewhat unwilling, she naturally accepted the reward happily. Then she left while looking back 3 times with every step, hoping that Jingwan would let her stay. Although it was a bath, it was not in the bathroom at the back of the bedroom. Instead, it was a small hot spring at the back of the main courtyard. There was no door, only layers of gauze curtains. The faint sound of water could be heard. Obviously, Li Hongyuan was still inside. Jingwan looked at the person who was wrapped in the mat on the ground. She could only vaguely see a pair of bare feet. She no longer had any hope. This time Li Hongyuan really did not hesitate to kill someone. In such a short time, it was not difficult to guess that he did not hesitate at all. He also did not show the slightest bit of guilt for going back on his words. It was as if he was certain that Jingwan would not be angry, or as if he did not care at all. Jingwan actually felt a little helpless in her heart. Wasn't he the one who did something wrong? Who was he trying to show such a self-righteous look to? What would happen if he gave in? At this time, being arrogant might really kill someone. Jingwan stepped forward and stepped into the water with her clothes on. She slowly swam to Li Hongyuan's side. Li Hongyuan took her into his arms and smiled sincerely. Obviously, Jingwan's actions really pleased him. He could not help but rub his forehead against Jingwan's. At this moment, he was like a child who had obtained his long-awaited beloved thing. Only the purest of joy was left. The wet clothes sticking to her body was not very comfortable, but Jingwan did not care. She rested her chin on Li Hongyuan's shoulder, and all the negative emotions in her heart dissipated. She lazily half-squinted her eyes and gently stroked his body without any hesitation. "If I get angry and turn away, what will you do?" "Wanwan, why don't you take a guess?" Li Hongyuan said meaningfully. She knew from his tone that it was definitely not something good. "I'm not guessing, but it's most likely that I won't like it. So Wanwan, you should feel wise for your choice." Li Hongyuan kissed her forehead again. It was not a wise choice, nor was it a deliberate avoidance of possible danger. It was just because of this man. Even if he did not show anything, she always felt that if she left, he would be sad. He would not show his sadness. How could she bear to? The two of them were sticky in the small hot spring, whispering sweet nothings to each other. The adults in the outer courtyard were not in a good mood, especially after learning about someone's atrocity. Compared to Li Hongyuan, Jingwan, and the others, they were really not in a good mood, especially those of a certain age. Since last night they had been tossing and turning and basically did not eat or drink much. Could be said that they were physically and mentally exhausted. When they were on the boat they had some time to rest, but in this state how could they fall asleep? At this moment they could not hold on any longer. Their bodies were really shaking. At this moment they did not know if it was because they were frightened, but they actually fainted. Fainting at this time was not a bad thing. The others might look disdainful on the surface, but in their hearts they might be a little envious. At least they could escape temporarily. However, it was probably not much different from drinking to drown one's sorrows. In the end, they still had to face it. Jingwan looked at the clothes Nanny Gong brought in and reached out to touch the material. It was of the best quality. These people are quite fast. However, Nanny Gong was not very satisfied. After all, they were rushed out. The workmanship and embroidery are not good. I guess the clothes are a little too big for the upper body. Prince and princess, please bear with it for a few days. There may not be many things in Jiangnan, but there are definitely many embroiderers. Find more embroiderers and don't use those complicated embroidery methods and patterns. Choose simple and delicate ones and the final result will be the same. It's not that bad. Nanny, you can deal with the rest as you see fit. Embroidery was secondary. The workmanship and the fit were the most important. They had been used to it for a long time. If the workmanship was not good or the fit was not good, they could easily feel it. Li Hongyuan watched and listened idly. When they finished and Nanny Gong turned to leave, he stood up. He casually wiped off the water droplets on his body and then put on the clothes. Unconsciously, he frowned. As expected, the things rushed out are not good. See, it was like this. They knew what was good and bad when they put on the clothes. It's mainly because we don't know the size. It's good that we didn't make it too small for you. Jingwan helped him adjust the position of his shoulders. If these places were smaller, it would be too tight. Then you really wouldn't be able to put it on. Such a small thing, but they can make such a big mess. They should be guilty by another level. Jingwan smiled and didn't respond. For some people, it didn't make a difference whether they were guilty by another level or not. After putting on the clothes, they went back to the room to wash their hair. Looking at the things in the room, other than some decorations, the ordinary things were all newly bought. It was clear that they had put in a lot of effort. However, in Li Hongyuan's eyes, there were all kinds of disdain. If there was a better choice, he probably wouldn't have stretched out his hand. Wanwan, you go and tidy up first. Jingwan didn't stand on ceremony. She went directly to the cleaning room at the back. Then Eunuch Mu entered the room and reported the situation of the officials. Li Hongyuan didn't even lift his eyelids. Tell them to get out of here. Without my summons, they are not allowed to appear in front of me. Yes. It was the same trick, but the officials of Kaming Prefecture were familiar with it. They were unfamiliar with it the first time, but they were familiar with it the second time. Their expressions were normal. The officials of Chongzhou Prefecture had such a wonderful expression. However, without Li Hongyuan's order, the people of Kaming Prefecture could only waste their time here. They belonged to Tongzhou Prefecture, so they couldn't interfere in the affairs of Shannon Prefecture. Especially those soldiers could only shrink back. It was so miserable. From top to bottom, they had things to do in their own territory and were relaxed, but they had to pretend to be subservient here. As expected, the calmest one was still Governor Su. According to his words, it was rare for him to leave Tongzhou Prefecture. Now he had the chance and he didn't have to worry about the government affairs. So why not? Seeing his hypocrisy, the former governor was so angry that his nose almost went crooked. He didn't clean up his mess, but now he wasted his time here. It should be known that the more time he wasted here, the more danger his family would be in. This old dog, either he cleaned it up himself or he had made arrangements long ago. There was no problem even if he didn't stay here. Li Hongyuan didn't care what they thought. He stayed in the yard for 2 days and didn't go out. The people who were lost on the way were also found. They didn't encounter the same accident as Nanny Gong and others. Therefore the maids were all fine. In addition, the other servants who stayed in Kaming Prefecture before also came to Chongzhou Prefecture. Jingwan remembered that there was a problem in the kitchen. She asked her husband about it, but he was calm and not in a hurry to deal with it. Since he was calm, Jingwan naturally didn't care about it anymore. On the third day, Li Hongyuan finally made a move. With a single sentence, he gathered all of the more capable accountants of the entire Chongzhou Prefecture. Everyone was uneasy about what he was going to do. Li Hongyuan was very straightforward this time. He did not keep everyone in suspense. With a single order, he handed over all of the accounts of the Chongzhou Prefecture for the past 10 years from various aspects. This move was simple and crude. Previously, even if they thought of all ways to settle the accounts, 10 years was too long. No matter how they settled it, there would be loopholes. Moreover, they used all the accountants in Chongzhou Prefecture, including the merchants' private accounts, the various government offices' accounts, and the big houses' accounts. It could be said that all kinds of people were mixed together. Because of this, it was harder to fake it. The hearts of the officials were beating wildly. They tried to find all kinds of words to delay it. Li Hongyuan didn't say a word. Then the blackguards were mobilized. Initially there were 50 blackguards on the surface. Although they knew through certain channels that the number needed to be doubled, now damn it, the number had reached 500. It was a dark mass. Just looking at it made people tremble. Even if there were tens of thousands of ordinary soldiers, they wouldn't have such a feeling. The blackguards wouldn't be courteous to you. If you dared to stop them, they wouldn't hesitate to draw a knife to your neck. If you snorted, you would see blood. Li Xian personally led the team. He was overflowing with hostility. He was simply another version of the King of Hell. The person in charge at first tried to joke with him, but he directly cut off an arm, killing the chicken to warn the monkey. It could be said that he was ruthless. Chapter 303. It was an obvious threat. Not only were the accountants trembling, but the officials beside them were also trembling. Eunuch Mu didn't seem to mind the trouble. He looked at the officials gloomily and said, "What His Highness means is that when these account books are all sorted out, you can go home. If you can do it in 1 day, then 2 days. If 2 days don't work, then 3 days. If 3 days don't work, then 4 to 5 days. Everything will be sorted out eventually. Of course, those who don't have a problem can go home. Otherwise, you'll have to move to another place." The black-robed guards were standing by the side. There was one person guarding the door of each room. There were 4 rooms inside. The door of each room was open, and the situation inside was clear at a glance. The degree of strictness was countless times worse than an imperial examination. Most of the officials only had one thought left in their minds. It's over, it's over, it's completely over. His Highness, isn't it inappropriate to let accountants outside the yamen check the accounts? Governor Sun stood out and said. The others nodded secretly in their hearts. If these people intervened, wouldn't everyone know the financial situation of the government? If father blames us, I'll bear the responsibility. You don't have to worry about it. Governor Su retreated and didn't speak anymore. It should be known that the accounts of Chongzhou Prefecture had nothing to do with him. The accountants came forward to take the account books with fear and trepidation. Then they entered the room one by one and began to calculate. One must know that these people were all outstanding talents, and they had done plenty of falsification in the past as well. As such, they knew most of the tricks involved. Yet, before they had even flipped through the books, they were already sweating profusely. Li Hongyuan was also in a very leisurely mood to accompany them. The scorching sun was overhead. Li Hongyuan held up an oversized umbrella over his head. There was iced soup to dispel the heat, fresh fruits, and the fan of the imperial bodyguard. In comparison, the others were suffering. If there was no such contrast, perhaps they would feel a little better. Living King of Hell, living King of Hell. Whether it was his reckless means of not being afraid of offending anyone, or his vile nature of not taking others seriously, these 3 words were incisively and vividly displayed. If it had been anyone else, let alone the other princes, even Emperor Luqingdi would not have been so ruthless. Li Hongyuan waved his hand, and Eunuch Mu immediately ran to fetch a part of the account books that had been checked. The problems had been marked, so it was clear at a glance. Li Hongyuan flipped through them casually, but he didn't find any clues from Eunuch Mu's face. After flipping through one book, he threw it aside and turned to the next one. Your courage is much smaller than I expected. Was this an exaggeration? Could he let out a sigh of relief because of this? As expected, Jin Qinhuang was someone who did not understand the affairs of the general public and did not know the value of gold and silver. Mama Gong came over and said, Your Highness, it's time for lunch. Her Highness sent me to ask where the food is. Where do we need to put it? 1 bowl of noodle soup for each of us. We can just carry it and eat it. Where else do we need to put it? The corner of Mama Gong's mouth couldn't help but twitch. Your Highness, do you have to be so mean? It's just a meal, how can you go so far? Aren't you afraid of being cursed by so many people? Well, it was said that a scourge would live for 1,000 years. The scourge of scourges was the scourge of scourges. How many people had cursed him? He didn't seem to be hurt at all. Yes. After sitting for a while, Li Hongyuan stood up slowly. Obviously, he was ready to go back to enjoy his delicious food. He hadn't even taken a few steps when a large group of people came over with food. They walked up to Li Hongyuan and greeted him in an orderly manner. There was no lack of beautiful maids who had been left here before. However, no one dared to do anything unruly now, let alone seducing the master of the palace. Your Highness, Her Highness said that this table must be here and sent someone to ask. It was superfluous, so she asked us to bring it over. After all, they had been husband and wife for more than 2 months. In addition, they had been together day and night. Their relationship had warmed up quickly. Some things should be said and shouldn't be said, but they had spoken frankly. The tacit understanding gradually formed. For example, at this moment Mama Gong hadn't gone back yet. Jingwan turned her head and guessed what Li Hongyuan might do. She directly made the decision. When Li Hongyuan saw the food, he roughly understood Jingwan's intention. He snorted mysteriously and left in a huff. The servants obeyed Her Highness's orders. They quickly set up the table and placed the food one by one. Kibbe said that the food was delicious. In addition, when the good wine was poured, the fragrance uncontrollably went into the nose. The crowd looked at each other and swallowed their saliva. Should they eat or not? They didn't even have breakfast and went out in a hurry. Their stomachs were already complaining about the empty city strategy. The leader was undoubtedly Governor Su. Although he couldn't intervene in the affairs of Shannon Commandery in terms of rank, he was the highest. The governor and other people of Shannon Commandery hadn't arrived yet. The governor of Shannon Commandery had gone to other manors to inspect, but he hadn't found anyone yet. The governor happened to be absent. Everyone knew that these people would hide as long as they could. They would only show up when they couldn't hide anymore. Governor Su said, "If we don't eat, wouldn't it be a waste of Her Highness's kindness?" So everyone ate without any pressure. After that, she sent food to the accountants. Of course, the food was of a lower class. There was no other way. The difference in class was obvious. No one would feel that there was anything wrong with it. If Jingwan were to make a fuss about it, it would be strange. On the contrary, even if the food was of a lower class, it was rare for the accountants to eat it. They temporarily put aside their worries and had a good appetite. Then this group of black-robed guards naturally couldn't be left behind. They went to eat in batches. Don't blame Jingwan for being biased. This group of brothers' meals were better than those Darren. Of course, there were a lot of people. If they wanted to fill everyone's stomachs, the kitchen space was far from enough. They had to set up a temporary stove. After that, it was time for the various officials to contribute their manpower. Speaking of which, even if they lent people to Li Hongyuan, they still had to suffer and be frightened. How miserable was that? After the meal, the accountants continued to work. The others waited for Li Hongyuan's arrival. They waited and waited but didn't see his shadow. Although they didn't want to face Li Hongyuan, but if he was in front of them, they could feel a little more at ease. If they couldn't see him, who knew what kind of tricks he was secretly playing? However, in the current situation, these black-robed guards weren't just guarding those accountants. Naturally, they were also guarding them. So there was no way to inquire about anything. They could only hope that Jin Qinhuang was actually intoxicated by the warmth and tenderness and had been staying in the inner courtyard. However, was Li Hongyuan in the inner courtyard? As the saying goes, good things don't come true, bad things come true. Li Hongyuan really wasn't in the other courtyard at this moment. Instead, he went to the treasury of Chongzhou Prefecture. Of course, he also brought along Jingwan. Li Hongyuan wanted to check the treasury of Chongzhou Prefecture. The people guarding the treasury wanted to stop him. In the end, they were directly taken down by Li Suyen's men. Speaking of which, the number of people guarding the treasury wasn't small. It was far more than the number of black-robed guards that Li Hongyuan brought. However, this wasn't a problem of quantity. First of all, these soldiers had never seen blood, let alone holding a human life in their hands. Their imposing manner fell by a large margin. Furthermore, these ordinary soldiers were like the common people. They naturally revered the existence of the imperial family. With Li Hongyuan around, who would dare to use a sword? When the black-robed guards drew their swords and went forward, they all consciously threw away their swords and obediently crouched on the ground with both hands covering their heads. Li Hongyuan shook his head. If there are too few people, it won't be of much use. We don't have to go through the main door to transport these things out. If there are too many people, we won't have enough manpower. We can barely take care of the front, but we will definitely be stretched out behind. So this is not realistic. Thinking about it, it was true. Jingwan thought about it again. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. How about we melt all the gold and silver and make a large one? The kind that can't be moved. It's easier to melt the small ones to make a big one, but it's not so easy to melt the big ones to make a small one. At that time, whether we find a way to melt it or move it elsewhere, there will be a big movement. We only need to leave a few people behind to monitor. I think those people won't have the guts to do anything to the people you leave behind. This idea is not bad. Li Hongyuan touched his chin with interest. Or we can simply move to a place where the world can see. Anyway, it can't be moved easily and we don't have to worry about it being stolen. Plus, there are so many people guarding it. If something goes wrong, for example, lost something, wouldn't it be very interesting? Hey, you're just trying to make trouble. If it really goes missing, Jingwan will be the first to suspect me. And thinking about it, her idea was quite childish. Moreover, if you put it outside for people to see, what kind of art do you think it is? Or do you want to make it into a work of art? Li Hongyuan saw Jingwan's eyes and knew what she was thinking. He reached out and brushed his fingers across her face. Am I that kind of person? He said with a little innocence. Anyone who knew Li Hongyuan even a little bit would think that he was that kind of person. Not seeing Jingwan's unchanging eyes, Li Hongyuan sighed with a little sadness. The most important thing for me to do now is to accompany my wife. Being able to do what needs to be done is already not bad. Where would I have the leisure to do other things? Wan doesn't understand my intentions, really. Looking at Jingwan, that pair of eyes became more and more bitter. Jingwan couldn't bear it anymore and put her palm on his face. She clearly knew that he was pretending, but that face was still too foul, making people think that she did something heinous to him. Li Hongyuan held her hand and took the opportunity to rub against it with a gentle smile. Jingwan pushed him away in disgust. He was clearly doing something immoral, but it gave people a very warm feeling. People who saw this kind of scene probably wouldn't think that it was fake. That kind of feeling couldn't be faked, and even if it was fake, it wouldn't be to this extent. In front of Jin Qinhuang Fei, Jin Qinhuang's entire person was completely different. He probably put her at the tip of his heart and loved her miserably. Chapter 304. Since they had already decided to melt the silver ingots and gold bricks, there was no need to be sloppy. When the melting place was just next to it, but there was no need for it at this time. What was needed was to make a large mold and move out all the gold and silver. Might be too late today. However, this was just a matter of saying one sentence. Li Hongyuan took Jingwan for a stroll along the way before leisurely going back. And the various Darren were anxiously waiting until Jin Qinhuang appeared again. However, before they could relax, Jin Qinhuang threw them a heavy bomb. Jin Qinhuang expressed that when he went to the treasury just now and saw so much gold and silver, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration and had a good idea. In Chongzhou Prefecture, wherever the scenery was good, he would prepare to make something there. Then, the next time the capital came to withdraw money, he would directly send it back and let Luchindi have a look. He was now brainstorming to see what would be better to make. But those who knew the origin of this batch of gold and silver, whether they were alienated from Chongzhou Prefecture or not, their vision turned black and they almost fainted. Actually, relatively speaking, the people of Chongzhou Prefecture were a little better. It must be known that the other treasury was completely empty. What should they do? What should they do? However, some people were more concerned about whether this was Jin Qinhuang's sudden whim or he realized that he was deliberately doing this. Although in essence it was more or less the same, but if it was the latter, it could only mean that Jin Qinhuang was not easy to fool. The areas that were not problematic in the accounts would have problems. All of you are mute. Did you not understand Ben Wang's meaning? Li Hongyuan supported his chin and said lightly. It was best not to do anything and just let those gold and silver obediently stay in the treasury. The reason why they were mute was because they did not want to go up and add bricks and tiles when they knew that it was a trap prepared for them. But if they did not open their mouths, everything would be fine? Naive. Then they smiled stiffly and started to give their own suggestions insincerely. Perhaps it was to stall for time. The things they said were extremely complicated. Many parts were put together and every position was fragmented. In order to increase their persuasiveness, they even gave lengthy speeches and quoted classics, as if it would be intolerable if they didn't use it. They even argued until their faces turned red. Li Hongyuan nodded from time to time. No one knew whether he was nodding in agreement or praising the wonderful speeches of the officials. In the end he said, "Everyone is right. It's just that it's hard to get everyone to agree. According to this prince's opinion, let's make it into an ingot. It's simple and saves time and effort. It also has a good meaning. It's a complete whole and there's no need to worry about losing a part of it. It's settled then." Li Hongyuan made the final decision. Everyone's faces cracked as they looked at Li Hongyuan. Their eyes clearly said, "Are you kidding me?" Li Hongyuan nodded. "That's right, I'm just teasing you." Li Hongyuan didn't get angry and he didn't cause any physical harm to them. However, almost everyone felt physically and mentally exhausted. Seeing that the time was almost up, Li Hongyuan went back to accompany his wife at a leisurely pace. Today he spent a lot of effort to face such a group of rough men and he liked each and every one of them. Jin Qinhuang's mood was a little unhappy, but their wonderful expressions before barely pleased him, so he didn't care that much. Then Mu Gonggong stood up again. In their eyes, this castrated dog was the most likely. After all, when facing Jin Qinhuang, they dared to be angry but didn't dare to speak up. They didn't even dare to show it. Now that they were facing Mu Gonggong, it wasn't like that. But Mu Gonggong didn't mind at all. Who let him be so confident? No matter how angry these people were, they couldn't do anything to him. Facing these people who couldn't wait for him to die but couldn't do anything to him, his heart still felt a little vile pleasure. To let Jingwan know of his thoughts, there was only one sentence. How could the word cheap be enough? Mu Gonggong only had one purpose for staying behind, and that was to pass on Wang Ye's words. He allowed them to go back and tidy up. Starting tomorrow they would have to sleep on the floor in this courtyard. You don't need to bring too many things and the servants also need to bring along. Who let your Chongzhou Fu be so shabby, to prepare such a shabby place for your mistress? It's also a little bigger than a palm. If there are too many things, there's no place to separate them. If there are too many people, there's no place to step on. You don't need to worry about food. Wang Fei has never treated people harshly in this aspect. Oh, I almost forgot. Wang Ye also said that if there are official matters that have not been dealt with, remember to go back and deal with them. Those are the important matters and cannot be delayed. Cannot be delayed. Let them go back earlier. It would have been dealt with earlier. Jingwan also knew that these people had been tortured badly by Li Hongyuan. But when she thought of the financial matters, she couldn't sympathize with them at all. In comparison, Li Hongyuan's little prank was simply a small matter and harmless. Naturally, no one dared to neglect what the living king of hell wanted to do. Even if they wanted to slack off, there would be people who would use special methods to remind them. And this time the place Li Hongyuan chose was rather special. It was in front of a teacher's building. Although the significance of this teacher's building to Chongzhou Fu was far less than the significance of Kaming Academy to Kaming Prefecture, but from the name, one would know its significance to scholars. Even though everyone could come to this place, but most of the people who came and went were still scholars. Suddenly creating such a big commotion, it naturally attracted attention immediately. Then they fell over each other to spread the news. More and more people gathered, not just those scholars. There were those who boldly went forward to inquire. After knowing the situation, many people were unable to restrain their anger, especially those scholars. This kind of action was simply an insult and stain to the teacher's building. Even if it was Jin Wangye, he could not do this. The voices of dissatisfaction grew louder and louder. There were even some people who disregarded everything and went forward to stop it. The situation became more and more intense, and it seemed that there was going to be an all-out fight. It must be known that because of the previous academy examinations, the matter had become very big. Until now, the provincial examinations had not been carried out. On the surface, the matter seemed to have temporarily calmed down, but it was only on the surface. Everyone knew that the longer the matter was dragged on, the worse the situation would become. They had long heard that the imperial court had sent a Wang Ye as an imperial envoy, but the other party had not done anything until now. This resentment had accumulated and deepened. In order to shift the hatred and also to create trouble for Li Hongyuan so that Li Hongyuan had no energy to focus on the salt policy, the people of Jiangnan's officialdom did not lack in publicizing Li Hongyuan's glorious deeds. A person with no redeeming qualities was sent to deal with the matters of the scholars. What did the imperial court treat them as? They were hot-blooded just to serve the imperial court. In the end they were treated like this? Because Kai Mingfu was not involved in the academy examinations, the scholars there were not affected. Naturally they would not do anything to Li Hongyuan. This Chongzhou Fu was not the same. It was a direct disaster area. Even though the matter of the scholars hanging themselves did not occur, but their feelings of anger were not little at all. Li Hongyuan's action at this moment was simply like hitting the muzzle of a gun and detonating a barrel of gunpowder. Anger burned reason and then directly acted. In such a situation, not only did no one stand out to stop it, on the contrary, there were people fanning the flames. Otherwise, the situation would not have escalated so quickly. Speaking of which, even though the officials had been detained by Li Hongyuan, not all of the officials of Chongzhou were present. In reality, there were many officials who did not even have the right to stand in front of Li Hongyuan. These people could not see their superiors, but that did not mean they did not have a tacit understanding. When they learned that Li Hongyuan had chosen to forge large gold and silver ingots in front of the teacher's building, many people were secretly delighted. The opportunity had come. Some people had received instructions beforehand. In the chaos, not only did they act against the enemy, they also acted against their own people. From fists to flesh to knives to flesh, it was only a matter of an instant. Angry roars were mixed with blood-curdling screams. There were also cries of murder and death coming from who knows where. However, if one were to look closely, they would discover that in the chaotic crowd, there were a few people who would always make a move at the most appropriate time. They were agile and decisively stopped the fatal attacks. Therefore, no matter how chaotic the situation was, there were no casualties. The first to notice these people were naturally those who fanned the flames. They thought, "Oh no," and secretly prepared to retreat. However, they would often be caught from behind before they could take 3 steps back. Just when they did not know how to end the situation, a group of men in black seemed to have descended from the sky. Like sharp blades, they ruthlessly pierced through and separated the people at lightning speed. Anyone who resisted would be unceremoniously attacked. They would not faint nor would they die. They only made them lose their ability to move for a short time. In the blink of an eye, the chaotic situation was completely under control. Then the sound of gongs and drums rang, accompanied by the sound of "quickly retreat." 2 groups of soldiers quickly arrived and isolated the unrelated people outside. Li Hongyuan was at the front, followed by Yu Zhongqing, Li Siyan and an E. At this moment the 4 of them had the same thing on them. It was as cold as the edge of a blade. "It's just a small matter, how can it cause such a ruckus?" The small official in charge of this matter immediately came out and knelt on the ground. He was about to explain. Li Hongyan's eyes swept over. "Take him down. Remove him from his position and investigate." He did not allow the other party to say a word. Li Siyan flipped off the horse and saluted Li Hongyuan. Then he just casually waved his hand. Then the people who were mixed in the chaos immediately came out. Everyone was carrying 1 or more people in their hands. Looking at their clothes, they were those who participated in the task assigned by Li Hongyuan. Most of them were there, but there were 3 who were wearing student uniforms. One of them seemed to be very famous among the students. Because they saw him being treated like this, even the students who were unable to move had some expressions on their faces. "Students, please don't be angry. Wang Ye is here in person, he will give us justice." He hurriedly dissuaded them. When he looked at Li Hongyuan, he was neither servile nor overbearing. Before he was modest, but now he was arrogant. No one felt that his attitude was wrong. Many people were convinced by his pride and felt that this was the role model of a scholar. Li Hongyuan sneered. "Wang Ye is here in person, who told you?" That person was slightly stuck. "I heard that Jin Wang Ye is handsome and unparalleled. Anyone who sees him, no one doesn't recognize him." "Heard? Where did you hear it?" "This is the first time Ben Wang left the capital." "Regarding this face, how could it be known to everyone?" "Before you speak, you should think of a draft." When everyone heard it, it seemed that it was true. Not to mention that the other party was a member of the imperial family. Generally, people wouldn't dare to talk about him. Moreover, he was a man. Qi Yuan didn't have the so-called male style. Who would talk about a man's appearance for no reason? Even if it was a famous courtesan somewhere, it would be good if her beauty could leave the land. "Can't say it? I know quite a lot about you, so I hope you can maintain this lofty and unyielding character." Li Hongyuan's voice fell. Li Siyan cooperated and took out a booklet. She opened it and read out the other party's name, age, place of birth and family background. It was a determined, diligent, filial, loyal and righteous person. Although his family was poor, he had a proud and upright image. For months ago, a windfall fell from the sky. A huge sum of 50,000 taels of silver. He built a mansion, bought servants and bought 4 beautiful concubines. He doted on his concubines and neglected his wife. He injured his father-in-law and brother-in-law. He ran amok in the village and joined hands with the academy's professors to secretly suppress 3 other students. https://11/11807/6653577. You're tuning in to the Biao's Wuxiao Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.